Hello. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. Trying something a little different with the hair today. We'll see how this stays, if it does. Hello. Today in Utah, we actually got some flurries of snow. We got some hail, some snow. It didn't stick, of course, but we have been getting more precipitation, which we desperately need. The Great Salt Lake desperately needs. So, people here, when they pray, the Mormons specifically, they talk about moisture, that they pray for moisture, not for water. I don't know why that is. It's a cultural thing, I guess. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. My name is Aubri Devashrayee. Today, I want to finish talking about Orientalism. Finish the video that I started yesterday that we were watching because it's very pertinent with the US imperialist aggression along with Israel against Iran. So let's finish that. And then I want to get into more of the headlines of why this war is being lost, why the US will continue to lose this war. Also, Trump gave an address about Iran last night. Pam Bondi was just fired, so I want to go over that. She'll probably be replaced by another lackey, of course, but we are seeing people start to break ranks. I mean, that's not intentional. Like, she probably wanted to stay. But that Trump is starting to purge people as his approval gets worse. And it's not just because of the people around him that his approval is bad. So I want to be talking about his approval as well. Someone recommended yesterday a video about JD Vance that John Oliver has that I want to watch. So let's do that. An update on AOC. Oh, and FD Signifier has this video on his FD Streams channel on YouTube. He also streams on Twitch, so go follow him, subscribe. He makes some really great content. It is called Left Tube Op Tier List, and I'm very curious about what he has to say, so I want to watch that. There was also a video that came into my algorithm from KSL News Utah news station, that says Latter-day Saints are abandoning the Republican Party. I somehow doubt that this will stay because the LDS Church, people who subscribe to these beliefs, are very white supremacist a lot of the time. And so I don't think there's going to be a huge exodus from the Republican Party. I think there are people just leaving the Republican Party in general. It's not just Mormons, but I'm curious to hear what they have to say about that. And then since we started reading the Scarlet Pimpernel for literature story time, albeit, excuse me, with a Marxist interpretation. Just to cut down on the aristocratic propaganda that the Scarlet Pimpernel acts as, in my opinion. So we'll watch a lead up to the French Revolution, this video, 7 key causes of the French Revolution, and then have that lead into story time. But that's today. I'm a little bit scattered all over the place. But luckily, I am not alone in this. There are many people who are just hanging on right now. Okay, so I like to start out with a funny video because I do this. And I saw this video from Trixie and Katya, two drag queens that are from RuPaul's Drag Race. And there's this clip called Trixie and Katya Figure Out Looks Maxing, kind of. And I don't know what they're going to be talking about, like how they will handle all of this, but I wanted to give it a watch. So let's do that. Shall we? All right. Here they are. Here are the girls with their split curtain. The red side for Katya, pink side for Trixie, obviously.
Looks maxing.
So this is so. This is so okay. You know, I don't want to like be okay boomer. Blah, blah,
Baby,
blah.
I got one step ahead of you. The other day I tweeted, before we looks max, can we make sure we personality bare
max.
minimum?
Yep.
There you go. Hello. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
But you know what's real? I watched a TikTok saying that you can call these men like a pedophile protector or like a fascist. The worst thing to be called is a beta. Because they really believe that the alpha beta thing.
So I'm not as obviously I'm not whatever. I'm not like chronically online anymore, and I'm also not a fucking sociologist. But like, and I'm not that smart. But like, it's just
Hello, Aliana. Welcome.
It just
We're watching
seems
Trixie
so
and Katya
a product of
talk about looks maxing.
chronic
Apparently,
online.
How are you doing?
Incel, lack of socialization. I don't know. It's like these guys are.
Talk about it.
Incel is it's incel related in a sense that like I don't even want to like dignify it with their talking about their names. It's like they're so loathsome. But the idea of looks maxing to me is so stupid.
But the thing is,
Well,
choosing to, like,
obviously.
put a little concealer
Obviously,
on.
it's
Well,
dumb.
it goes further than that, of course.
But I'm saying, like,
yeah.
wanting to look your best.
That's what it is.
Is quite far from, I think, looks maxing. But it's like a sign of, I think, health when someone like does their hair and puts on a little perfume. Or, like,
Yeah,
you know,
but this is different. I'm good. I listened to a song. What song was this? I'm curious.
This is a very historic phenomenon that has existed probably since the days of the boneyard.
right. The cave people are probably putting on the fancy flowers in their hair or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, even the primates are taking ticks out of the, you know what I mean? They're grooming each other.
Yeah.
Grooming. But it's so funny. It's like, I don't know how to describe
That
it.
little
But they're
grooming.
like breaking bones. They're doing trend. They're doing, you saw the guy
Meth.
get his wig snatched?
What's tren?
It's a very powerful steroid. Tren
Yeah,
is one
they're
of
doing
the,
steroids.
testosterone
Apparently,
supplements that gives you all the.
Clavicular is like sterile now, infertile. So I guess that happens if you use a lot of steroids. I wouldn't know about this. Same Things by Damage and Amber Ryans. You should give it a listen. It's a song about revolution and how the enemy trains for war already. Ooh, that's interesting. I'm going to write this down because I'm old-fashioned. I'm literally going to be writing it down. Same Things. Because for Culture Corner tomorrow, I want to give it a listen. Damage and Amber Ryans. Ooh, that would be lovely. Thank you very much. Yeah, I really want to watch that.
Back knee, it makes you crazy.
Oh.
Trend is like real serious.
Yeah.
So like HGH,
Thank you.
testosterone. Trend is like the.
They're also taking meth to get skinnier.
Well, yeah,
I've heard about
that guy.
that.
That is, I was like, that is. The
I mean, it does
stupidest
make
Oh,
them
they look
skinny.
cool.
Yeah, it
just
also ruins
from
your life. But like,
what I'm
do
seeing
you
so
know?
far.
I'm not. I've heard.
First frame.
I've heard. But like, why don't you just? Anyways, that's.
You're not going to be able to inspire the masses if you keep living your dream. You're out here living your dream on a podcast. It ruins your life, by the way. Look at me. Let's take a break.
Let's do some ads. No, that was. I think it's a rumor. It's a rumor.
No, they're doing it.
They're doing
No,
it.
they are doing meth.
Like all?
Well,
Yeah.
do you listen to what's that pod? I think it's from Vox. They did a whole segment on it.
Okay.
And that's literally what they're doing. I listened to it last week.
So okay,
Interesting.
that's another that's a interesting thing. It's like
Where do we draw the line between healthy self-care
so
and
this is I think where the term makes more sense now. Looks maxing, not health maxing, not optimizing. How do
yeah.
no matter the cost, how do I get my shell to be a certain way?
Right.
To attract whatever. And
My
Yeah,
shell.
looks maxing is just about physical appearance,
Yes.
and it came from male incels.
Yes.
back in
That's
like
how
the
I feel
2010s.
about
Oh yeah,
my
because
body.
I think it comes
Just a
from
shell.
the alpha beta.
Like-
Like you're trying to cheat genetics to be an alpha if you aren't an alpha, and sort of like the self pressure of like, don't be a beta, look like this, so you have access to this. But I
Women.
don't get the sense that women like this.
what they
Exactly. Women don't like this. They don't like this. Hence the involuntary celibacy of the people practicing these things.
To this, but I don't get the sense that women like this.
No.
that's the thing. It's kind of not about the women.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
the femboy people.
It's they're all getting together or on their little party buses with their little meth and they're fucking rubbing their dingies together. I mean, I just made that up, but
They're rubbing their dinghies together. Oh, that's so funny. I don't know. I have no problem with talking to women, and I'm not exactly a good looker. I think they're insecure. No, you're right. You're right. It's all about the insecurity. How these people are not comfortable in their own skin. They don't think that there is a need for self-reflection or learning or becoming interesting, perhaps having their own kinds of like hobbies and things that they're passionate about, or like heaven forbid they actually like ask a woman anything. Ask a woman like try to learn about them and their interests and lives. So it's really not about the women. It's all about trying to like posture as like being really masculine, but in the meantime like doing like the most like it's like very submissive behavior in my mind to be like, oh, I have to conform to this in order to get the attention that I want. That's like, okay, you can't just like start a conversation. You're right.
I think
They
that is the
are.
vibe.
They're subs.
It's wild.
They're involuntary subs. They want to be doms. They want to posture as a dom, but they don't know how to do this. Okay. So, moving along. We were watching this video yesterday, The History of Orientalism, and I think she's doing an excellent job at going over the various nuances of this. So we're on the cultural critique section. Let's continue this, and then we will get into more of the current events that are happening right now.
Whatever the initial underlying motives were about archaeology, we have to recognize that it did develop into a serious and rigorous science, and that it ended up benefiting a large.
I just have one more thought about the looks maxing. To me, like, there are many scholars that think that the stricter gender roles you have, the more it engenders homoerotic behavior and desire, because with patriarchy and sexism, men are being told that women are not smart or less than them. They're not as capable. And so they have this hatred towards women, this antagonism, and this reverence for masculinity that I'm like, this is gay behavior. Do you realize that this is gay behavior? But that's what Katya was saying, is that they're like, yeah, we hate women and we love men, and I'm checking guys out at the gym when I'm getting swole, or whatever the fuck. It's like, okay, you just be honest about it. Don't be toxic about it. All of these closet cases are ruining the nation, but the world at large, in my mind. Anyway, back to the programming.
Host of people who now had extensive knowledge about their own ancestors. The humanist approach brought
Not this again. Oh no. Just kidding. If you refresh, it's fine. I don't know why it's been doing this,
media
though.
independently to arrive at a conclusion. Whatever the initial underlying motives were about archaeology, we have to recognize that it did develop into a serious and rigorous science.
So, the section before this, she was talking about how archaeology developed as a colonial enterprise to be adventurous and expand the Western colonial empire, and do this under the guise of study, of scientific discovery, of learning about peoples, but then taking these artifacts, keeping them, and not giving them back.
And that it ended up benefiting a large host of people who now had extensive knowledge about their own ancestors. The humanist approach brought by Europeans who studied the past in an objective and detached manner helped us better understand the history of humanity. One of Said's critique is the romanticization of the Orient, as if Westerners had stripped the Orient of all of its nuance and complexities and instead painted an exotic image of it. To that I say that Romanticism isn't uniquely targeted at the Orient. It's rather an expressive mode that has shaped our perspective of many different eras and places, including the Middle Ages, ancient Greece, and even the prehistoric world. Romanticism is what draws people in. It's what catches their interest and transports them to another universe. Romantic depictions of the Middle Ages have created an entire genre of fantasy that has shaped pop culture. Think of LARPing, Renaissance fairs, Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, Dungeons and Dragons. All of these elements are deeply embedded in modern culture. Oh, but a romantic depiction of the past is not historically accurate. Well, that's not the point. The point is to create an atmosphere. It's to catch a vibe. You pick the elements which you find to be the most interesting, the most memorable, and you create an entire enchanting universe with them. Personally, as a Middle Easterner, I enjoy looking at Orientalist paintings. And yes, we can talk about the issues and inaccuracies, but I find beauty in them. I don't think these paintings were made by people who hated the East. Perhaps they had their own stereotypes, but
This is where I'm going to have to disagree. Because I personally am not, like, I think it's good for us to look at these paintings, to have this art so that we can study it. I don't particularly admire it because of the inaccuracies, and as she mentioned, and because of the reason why people were even there in the first place, which is colonization and imperialist expansion. So I don't particularly enjoy, like, necessarily say like, oh, this is amazing, I love this, like, this is incredible. Like, there are some very artistic skills that have been used with these kinds of paintings or artwork or architecture, whatever it may be, but it doesn't justify the way that these things happened. And so I think it's still important to preserve these things and analyze them, but they're not something that I'm going to be like revering. And I think that's kind of healthy. She's allowed to like that. I happen to not. I don't think there is really, it feels a little bit like revisionist history, but because there's a lot of harm that was done, like these paintings, the painters themselves may not have had ill intent, but the way that these paintings were used and the mechanism that allowed them to be created and then to be sold and distributed makes it so that it was justifying a lot of violence and hatred. So even if the artists themselves didn't hate the subjects or the people or the area, it still was used for nefarious means. So just throwing that out there to keep in mind.
See these works of art as an expression of longing, escapism, fascination even. I would argue that the West's artistic engagement with the Orient was often driven by curiosity and admiration, not just by a desire to dominate and diminish. Of course, some portrayals were distorted and exoticized, but to claim that all Western representations of the Orient were fundamentally degrading reduces the complexity of how these Western artists and scholars encountered the Orient. Many were aware of these cultural differences, but also drawn to them, sometimes even critical of their own cultures in comparison. We have to keep in mind that the Western view of the Orient is not a single monolithic discourse on power. It's fragmented, it's evolving, and it's sometimes even contradictory. Why? Because it literally did a 180. The date of publication of this book is very interesting to me because it's on the eve of the Iranian Revolution of 1979. Iran, which leaned heavily on this Orientalist image of itself and which held close ties with the West, went through a profound transformation that sent shockwaves through the Middle East and the West. It became an Islamic republic. Before 1979, Islamist factions did not hold political power. They were considered to be fringe. But after the Iranian Revolution, they started gaining in popularity. The Iranian Revolution legitimized the idea that an Islamic government was not only feasible, but could also potentially be powerful. Sunnis and Shias competed for leadership in the Muslim world, which created a domino effect of radicalized.
Just to point out, in the background, she's playing, what is the name of the song? It's the Arabian Dance in the Nutcracker. I recognize that. It's very quiet. What is that called? Of course, that is Orientalism in the Nutcracker. Nutcracker. Oh yeah, I think it's just called Arabian Dance. So another example of Orientalism that still exists today in many ways. So there's a lot of bastardization that happens around Christmas time. I was in the Ballet West Nutcracker. Ballet West is a ballet company in Utah, a professional company. I was not in the company itself, but I auditioned and was in the Nutcracker for 5 years, and there were roles for girls to try out for that were called Oriental servants, and it was just this huge conglomeration of various countries and cultures. Just another example of Orientalism not respecting where certain things come from, their origins, and that it is this very bigoted perception of people when, even though people would probably say like, oh, we're paying homage, it's like, okay, how about you consult someone or look up something that has to do with actual history? But it is also problematic for, like, because we're in Utah, there are all of these like white kids playing Oriental servants and doing the Arabian dance. So this continues. Why we need to keep talking about this.
With different factions fighting against one another. Slowly but surely, the romanticized Orient once imagined by the West disappeared, and the final nail in the coffin was the tragic event of 9/11. I would say that Disney's Aladdin was one of the last pieces of popular media that depicted Orientalist imagery. Terrorism, women's oppression, and war were at the forefront of everyone's mind when thinking about the Middle East. The place once known for magic carpets and glowing minarets was now known as the land of forever wars and never-ending conflict. One topic gained significant traction
instigated
from all of this
by
and would
Western
become
powers.
a major political subject ever since. The Muslim
For the most
woman.
part.
Is she oppressed? Should she be liberated? How do we liberate her? What do we make of her? When Europeans first traveled to the Middle East and North Africa, they were confronted with a different culture and mentality regarding women. Women were veiled and hidden from the public. Europeans also came across a new institution, the harem. Harems were common in many wealthy Middle Eastern households until the 20th century. They were a private space for women, including wives, children, servants, and concubines. Since they were denied entry to these harems, they let their imagination run wild as to what was going inside them. They painted harems as a sensual and erotic fantasy, beautiful naked women belly dancing for the sultan. Now, the reality was obviously much more tame. One painter would manage to depict accurately what was going inside them. Eugène Delacroix found it difficult to sketch Arabic women. Whenever he would try to sketch them from afar, the Arabic women would immediately alert their husbands. Delacroix was at the Algerian port on the way back home when he met a merchant who gave him access to his household's harem. Delacroix then painted his famous work of art called The Women of Algiers. As you can see, it was far from the sensual fantasy that was imagined by other painters. We have to understand the differences in gender norms between the West and the Middle East. In many parts of Europe, aristocratic women were expected to appear in public alongside their husbands, but their dress and conduct was strictly regulated by social and religious norms. By contrast, many Muslim societies placed limits on women's public visibility. However, a greater degree of freedom was granted to them in female-only places such as the home, the harem, the bathhouse. They weren't as tightly regulated by men because they were inside a women's only environment. While both systems were patriarchal, they operated differently. One emphasized public participation with strict behavioral codes, while the other emphasized segregation, but with a degree of freedom within the private sphere. Each imposed different constraints, but also allowed for different kinds of autonomy and agency. The Western model clearly won and was spread through globalization and modernization. Different waves of feminism also expanded women's rights and freedoms. Women were encouraged to seek an education, to get in the workforce, to participate in public life in the same way men did. They were also given a greater degree of freedom in regards to their dress code and to their sexual decisions. But we have to understand that the Western world had centuries of gradual progress before it reached the point of women's liberation. The transition was much more quick and sudden for the Muslim world. Iran, for example, was a very traditional and conservative society up until the beginning of the 20th century. Women wore the veil and chador and followed conservative Muslim gender roles. However, things changed drastically in 1935. Reza Shah of Iran, at that time Persia, issued a decree known as the Unveiling, Kafsh Hijab, which banned all Islamic veils and many types of male traditional clothing. This was done in an effort to modernize Iran. The ban lasted 5 years, after which women were given the freedom to choose whether they wanted to veil or not. One of the legacies of Reza Shah was that it made veiling into a fundamental political issue in the country. The society experienced a complete pendulum swing after the Iranian Revolution of 1979, which now imposed the veil on women. Iranian society was now divided in two distinct camps. One was more traditional Islamic, while the other was more liberal and modern. I would argue that permanent change doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. It takes generation to warm up to new ideas and lifestyles. When radical change happens overnight, it fuels extremism on both ends. And sadly, this has been the situation in the Middle East and Iran for the past century. A society that hasn't completely let go of its traditional roots, but has now been catapulted into modernity without the proper preparation. This even reflects in the way the West perceives the Orient. You have the Orientalist image versus the Islamist one. Both are caricatures.
And used to justify
One critique
Western
of
aggression.
Said wrote an interesting paragraph. The real story here that Said reveals against his intentions is the remarkable fact that Europeans and Americans in the 19th century knew more about the cultures of the Middle East than we do now. They read the tales of 1001
Yeah,
Nights
I'm sure-
and dreamt of the
I'm
Alhambra.
sure that's the case.
Was this just a complacent imperialist?
Especially if you are living in the good old US of A, our education is very lacking. The whole world knows this, maybe except for Americans.
Celebration of power based
Especially
on the
with foreign
contrast
affairs.
between nostalgia for the great Oriental past and contempt for the Arab present? No, I think there was real curiosity and admiration, but where has it gone? Today, the West is bleakly incurious about the history of Islam, its art, peoples, and learning. There's a blank wall of terror. This wall has been strengthened by Said's book because it closes down a crucial way for cultures to encounter one another. It closes down romanticism. I'm an idealist. In my ideal world, we would all love and admire each other. But unfortunately, that's not reality. But if politics are going to divide us, at least let art bridge the gap. In this sense, perhaps the Orientalism of the 19th and 20th century was better than what we have now, which in many cases is just hatred and ignorance. As an Iranian who was born and raised in the West, I feel torn
I don't know about that.
because I deeply love and admire these two cultures, but they are divided by politics. We might need romanticism, aesthetics, and beauty to ease the encounters between both cultures. A bit of Oriental.
I agree with that. I think if people are more willing to engage in culture, especially art, and actually partake in a respectful way that isn't co-opting art, that is really helpful and healing. But I do not think that Orientalism is the answer. Like, I don't think we should have people who are not from these areas or like have this ethnicity in various Middle Eastern countries, North African countries, that we should have people outside of this creating art about these kinds of people, because that is what Orientalism was, and it only leads to a lot of perpetuating stereotypes, misunderstanding of culture, and we should be elevating people who are from their culture so that they can actually have monetary gain from their work and not have it go to imperialist pockets, because that is usually what happens. Like, I know she's coming from more of like an artistic perspective of like, well, it's art, we should not be demonizing art as much, but it's how the art was used to justify these means of extraction, of getting cheap labor and resources from these lands in a very violent manner, and how this pattern has continued throughout time. And this idea about Orientalism is starting to come up again, which is why I'm talking about it with this war against Iran. So
here and there sprinkled to create a harmonious relationship. When I visited Iran 2 months ago with my husband, and it was his first time traveling to the Middle East, we explored various parts of the country. We went north next to the Caspian Sea, which was lush green. We went to Tehran, the capital, which was full of life and action. We visited Persepolis and archaeological sites and the history of ancient Persia. But
So
our
pretty.
favorite part of the trip was Yazd, which was a desert city and truly the Orientalist image imagined by Europeans in the 19th century. It was as if you would enter A Tale of 1001 Nights, as if you entered the world of Aladdin. I understood
What?
the Orientalists. I understood why they were
Why do you like it though? Why is that a good thing? Why was that your favorite spot? When it's a projection of Western power used to subjugate nations and people for their own imperialist gain.
drawn to this landscape and why they depicted it so often, because it was romantic and so different from what there is in Europe and North America. I don't know how the Western view of the Orient will evolve, and I don't know how the Oriental view of the West will evolve, but I hope it's on a more positive trajectory. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Bye.
Okay. Oh, this is interesting. Is chivalry respectful or sexist? Well, it is sexist because it's coming from this point of that women can't defend themselves or have limited power and that men have to be the powerful ones. Hi. Come here. Here she is. Juniper joining us. Yeah, I like the history that she provided, but I am not on board with this concept of saying like it's a good thing to have colonizers try to mimic certain kinds of art forms or display people from a disempowered position where it is an imperialist colonizer perspective to have all of these depictions not be accurate to the actual cultures, to lighten people's skin, to make them look more European in these portrayals. So, a kitty. This is Juniper. She's making a show. Bug. She's been laying in there more. For a little bit, she wasn't doing that. I think I, like, rustled the blanket in a way she didn't like. And then she's like, I don't want to lay there anymore. We have so many nicknames for her. Okay. So I wanted to get a different perspective. Like, as we were going through that video, I realized that it maybe wasn't as much of a decolonizing lens as what I would prefer, that I personally agree and resonate more with. So this is a video from TRT World called Orientalism Explained. I'm curious to see how they'll frame it.
We're going to be exploring a book that changed how we look at history, entertainment, and our heroes and villains.
Hello, Turd Bomb. Welcome. This is happening
Today
like
we're
every
going to be
time
exploring
now.
a book
So
that
weird.
changed how we look at history, entertainment, and our heroes and villains. Wait, no. I mean,
How
this
are you
one.
doing?
Orientalism.
Crimson Jihad will rain fire on one major US city each week.
Orientalism is a term brought to prominence by this guy, Edward Said, in 1978. He argued that Europeans and Americans constructed images of the Orient, that includes Asian and Arab countries, that were self-serving. Images that reduced the Orient to projections that lived in the white man's imagination. Violent, stuck in the past, sensual, exotic, monstrous, mysterious, and other.
You want to know what the business world thinks of you? We think 100 years ago you were living out here in tents in the desert, chopping each other's heads off, and that's exactly where you're going to be in another 100.
Oh, God.
This is it?
I know we all loved Aladdin as kids, but it was basically
All of those different shots of the emotions that he was showing. Kind of tired. Been digging and filling in a trench today. Holy shit. That's a lot of work. What was that for? I hope you can have time to rest.
a huge Orientalist fantasy, and was so popular, it's now become a live-action film featuring Will Smith in blueface. Seriously, what were they thinking?
Yeah.
His depictions of Arabs was racist as hell. From the extreme poverty to the idea of a bloodthirsty Arab man and the submissive yet seductive Arab woman.
Yes. I will be honest, because, like, growing up in Utah, this is a trippy frame. There we go. There we go. Growing up in Utah and in a household that did not embrace our Indian heritage as much because of assimilation that was coerced through Mormonism. This movie, Aladdin, was one of the like few touchstones that I had to the Middle East. And this was a movie that I really liked growing up, but as I got older and learned more and was like, oh, it's not just about seeing someone that you can relate to that comes from this area of the world. It is about actually putting people who are from this area of the world in charge so they can make the things that accurately represent them. To run some in-ground fiber cables for... Oh, okay, gotcha. Damn, that is so much work.
Cut off your ear if they don't like your face. It's barbaric.
Yeah.
But hey, it's home.
These images present a narrative.
This is a fun fact. When I was in high school, I played Jasmine in our musical of Aladdin. So I have directly participated in this Orientalism. But that is also very Utah to just have Disney be like the basis of art, really. Or like all of the musicals that are chosen around here. Putting conduit in ground 12 to 16 inches. Yeah, you had to dig. Yeah, hopefully you get some time off, some downtime from that, hopefully.
Of how the Western world sees itself. Superior and rational.
The West is indisputably the freest, the cleanest, the fairest civilization in history. That's why so many immigrants want to move here.
Everyone else as mysterious and inferior.
Okay,
if
Tucker.
not outright barbaric.
There were 4 of us. Okay. But still, that's a lot of work.
Well, these Arabs don't care if we kill each other. They're not going to interfere in our business.
What are you doing?
It's Indiana Jones.
This is not the Australian Bachelor.
It works to weave a story that the West is
Australian
bringing
Bachelor.
civilization and...
This shot from Game of Thrones, the white savior complex in this moment of Game of Thrones, they're calling her mother. Like, you saved us from being enslaved. Like, okay. Today is my last work day of the week. Oh, nice. Good. I'm glad that you get to have more downtime.
grace to the rest of the world, saving them from themselves. Said said these images strip people from the Orient of their humanity. He also argued these projections functioned like a self-serving loop. You invade and conquer a people because you believe they're barbaric, and then you hope to civilize them in your own image because...
Yes, that is what the last video was missing. Is that it's not just about like, oh, art is beautiful, why can't we have like an exchange of culture? It's how this stuff is used and the way that it is portrayed, because it justifies foreign aggression and violence in order to support imperialist extraction from places and to subjugate nation states and the people that live in them. So I agree with that.
Now you find them exotic, sensual, and in need of your help.
American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
It paints how we all talk about the Middle
Classic
East, the Muslim world,
America,
and the so-called
freeing
Orient.
people
And we
with
see the impacts of that
bombs.
on politics and real people's lives.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States.
These ideas have been perpetuated in the politics, art, music, movies, religion, and military adventures that have
Oh my god, that's Iggy Azalea. The amount of people who've worn saris, white people, or people who are not Daisy, is really concerning and part of the problem.
underpinned the West's relationship with the Orient. Over 40 years on, Edward Said's explanation of how media and colonialism intersect is still as relevant as ever. We should keep this in mind when we try and differentiate between authentic portrayals of the Middle East and outdated racist and Orientalist fantasies.
All right. Yep, I liked that better. Okay. Moving along, so continuing with talking about Iran, this is a video from Democracy Now! They have on Spencer Ackerman and Behruz Gamari Tabrisi on Trump's Iran debacle. So let's give this a watch because they get some really great people to interview.
To escalate attacks in the Middle East after President Trump delivered a primetime address in which he threatened to bomb Iran back to the Stone Ages. Global stock prices tumbled and oil prices jumped after Trump vowed to continue striking Iran, even though he claimed Iran had already been decimated militarily and economically.
The progress we've made, I can say tonight that we are on track to complete all of America's military objectives shortly, very shortly. We're going to hit them extremely hard over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
He is looking rough. He's sounding rough. There is a reason why he is pursuing all of this escalation across the board with all kinds of policy, foreign, domestic, because he's dying. That's what's happening. He doesn't feel like he has anything to lose, really. He wants to have a legacy of some sort. This, like, idea of masculinity and violence that he has in his mind, that he has unfortunately made popular throughout the nation and the world with a lot of fascists. So it will be great when this shit dies. But unfortunately, him dying will not be the end of the problem that he represents. We need to completely upend our political system and put guardrails so that people like him cannot be in power, that they are held accountable, because, like, he has been able to get away with everything. And that can't happen again.
We're going to bring them back to the Stone Ages where they belong.
President Trump
Where they
also
belong.
repeated his threat to attack Iranian
It's disgusting.
civilian infrastructure, which is considered
A war
crime.
If there is no deal, we are going to hit each and every one of their electric generating plants very hard and probably simultaneously. We have not hit their oil, even though that's the easiest target of all.
Which isn't true.
because it
Israel
would
hit
not
their
give
oil
them
fields.
even a small
One
chance
of
of
them.
survival or rebuilding.
Israel hit an oil field and it caused black rain, black toxic rain. Who knows what the health consequences will be from that?
Earlier in the day, Trump spoke at an Easter lunch event at the White House. He gave attendees a preview of his primetime remarks.
And tonight I'm making a little speech at 9 o'clock, and basically I'm going to tell everybody how great I am. What a great job I've done. What a phenomenal job. What a phenomenal job I've done.
We're joined right now by...
He also said in this part here, I saw a clip of this in a different video I was watching, where he said, like, we don't have enough money for daycare. we don't have money for daycare. Like, we have wars going on right now, even though he's not supposed to call it a war. He's been calling it a war many, many times, even though legally they're trying to get him to not say war, because then that means they would have to go through Congress and that what they're doing is illegal, which we all know. But he just is, like, not even good at being corrupt and evil. He's really a dope about it. And that is a huge indictment of our political system and the people that it allows in and how it insulates power and wealth, especially. But for him to be talking about how, like, we can't afford daycare, that's a state thing. That can't be done on a federal level. Like, why would you even bring that up? Now you're going to get people mad. And I'm glad about that. More people need to be upset. You're going to get people mad that they're like, what? We're talking about, like, we might even have a possibility of daycare? Why are you even thinking about that and pairing these things? Just showing, like, how stupidly our tax dollars are being used.
Two guests. Spencer
in addition
Ackerman
to violently
is a Pulitzer
with genocide
Prize
and
National Magazine award-winning
war.
reporter, the author of Reign of Terror, How the 9/11 Era Destabilized America and Produced Trump, and the Forever Wars newsletter. His latest piece headlines, So You Lost a War to Iran. Behrouz Gamari Tabrizi is a fellow at the Center for Place, Culture, and Politics at the CUNY Graduate Center. He was previously professor and chair of the Department of Near Eastern Studies at Princeton University, the author of several books, including Islam and Dissent in Post-Revolutionary Iran, as well as a memoir about his years on death row in Evin prison in Tehran called Remembering Akbar, Inside the Iranian Revolution. His latest book, just out this year, is titled The Long War on Iran, New Events, Old Questions. We begin with Behrouz Gamari Tabrizi. Thanks so much for joining us again. Why don't you respond overall? Many people were waiting with bated breath to see what President Trump was going to announce in his prime time address, the first one since the U.S. and Israel attacked Iran. What did you make of what he said?
First of all, thank you for having me back in the show. I think it was a very anticlimactic kind of speech, and as we expected, he structured his speech around lies and delusions, I think. And
surprise, surprise.
He did not add anything new about what we already have heard from him. And I think possibly the most important part of this speech last night was the timing of it. And this was a speech that one should have expected to hear before the start of the war, because it was mostly about justification of the war.
Hello. Exactly. They have done jack shit to propagandize the American people for this war, because they have been all over the place with their messaging. They do not have clear objectives despite stating them, or stating them after they already entered the war and they're like, oh, I guess we have to come up with objectives. And the stock market slumped after this speech, and he did this speech to make it so that the finance people, the people on Wall Street, the traders and brokers, that they wouldn't panic. It was to quell their fears, and they watched the speech and they were like, uh-oh, we're fucked.
And my take on it is that it was, in a sense, a kind of admission to defeat in the war of narratives. And I think that the White House feels that they need to go back to point zero and to speak about why are we in the war with Iran, and what the objectives are, and what the end goal is, and how we can find an off-ramp to end this war. And
And Spencer, I mean, one of the things, as Behrouz just said, it's not only that Trump seemed to repeat without any variation at all, various comments he's made in the past weeks on social media. But some of the key issues, if you could talk about some of the key issues he did not mention, including the surge of U.S. troops,
that is
the
glaring.
military personnel who are en route to the...
Because there probably will be a ground invasion. That's what's happening. They are building up troops around there, and we know from all sorts of intel that it will be disastrous to have a ground invasion of Iran. They have high ground, they understand the climate and geography, and the US is completely unprepared for this. And then they're also trying to say, like, we're gonna take the uranium. And that requires, like, a whole thing. Like, apparently they have to build, like some sort of, like, gangway to bring out the uranium, to put it into a plane in order to get it out. And you have to have people who have training in this. And so who knows what is happening with that. They probably won't be able to do it.
Middle East now.
Indeed. Good morning, Nermeen. Good morning, Amy. Lovely to be here with Beirut, especially. I'm going to learn a lot from this conversation. This was a speech that
was a
we
very
shouldn't
gracious thing to
normalize,
do as a
even
guest.
for Trump. This was a
I liked that.
cavalcade of lies on top of the delusions and the incoherence there. But most importantly, as you mentioned, while Trump is trying to domestically reassure his base and more perhaps to the point, reassure markets that he hasn't just plunged the United States and the world into a compounding economic disaster, is that there is an aircraft carrier with 6,000 sailors, 3 destroyers on its way. It will be the 3rd such carrier strike group committed to this conflict, as well as the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit and elements of the 82nd Airborne that are on their way.
Yeah, I mean, not to interrupt him, but to interrupt him. Apparently, there are many people who are in the U.S. military who are becoming conscientious objectors, where they are filing for this. The paperwork is being, like, flown into them as they are being deployed. And that is great, because the administration seems to be panicking that there are many people in the military that are saying, like, I don't want to go to this war. I don't want to die for Israel's war. A lot of people are calling it that they don't want to be killing people, and there is no good reason to be doing it. I don't understand, personally, the inclination to join the military. That is not in my genetic code. Like, not in my fiber. But because the US military also, let's be honest, not that different from the IDF in the way that they have committed all of these war crimes. And also, when people come back from the military, they are just used and abused by the system and then left to cope with all sorts of trauma and pain. So I have seen that firsthand, having worked for a nonprofit that helps people provide housing and transitioning from incarceration, that the needs of veterans, there was a lot of crossover with veterans who were experiencing a lot of trauma and not able to get the care that they needed, and that they end up just being used by this system over and over again for cheap labor when they come back as well, and that there is a lot of crossover with substance use disorders and homelessness and unemployment. So that's what happens. That doesn't happen to everyone, but it really is sad how the government really doesn't give a shit about veterans.
For purposes that Trump neither explained nor even really mentioned at all. So while he is trying to kind of, as he has frequently throughout this conflict, send a message that this is not a forever war, this is not an open-ended conflict, this is not like those other foolish presidents in the Middle East, what he's doing is entrenching this conflict ever deeper without any mechanism to resolve resolve it. While Trump emphasized that, or attempted to emphasize that he has been consistent in his
I like that
explication of
correction.
what American
Attempted
goals
to
are in Iran, which he
emphasize.
hasn't. He's been all over the place. He called the very first day of the war for an Iranian uprising to overthrow the Islamic Republic, which hasn't happened and frankly doesn't seem like it's going to happen. What in fact has happened is that Iran has changed the entirety of this conflict. It has pivoted this conflict onto its own territory and its own goals, and the United States does not have a military mechanism to redress that, primarily the throttling of the Strait of Hormuz.
And so, Behruz, you had mentioned that there is a risk. I mean, so as Spencer said, there are thousands and thousands of troops on their way
looking at
to
Amy
the Middle
Goodman
East.
on her
You
phone.
said one of the possibilities, what these troops
At the table
would do
next
there,
to her.
is to try to take one of the islands, Iran's islands, and that not necessarily Kharg Island, which is the only one one really hears about.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the taking over of Kharg Island is extremely dangerous and risky. And it would threaten not only the stability of the region, but I would go as far as to say that it would threaten the stability of the entire world order. And we are indeed in that moment that this instability of the world order is at the table, and Iranian side knows this very well, that they hold that card in their hands, and if they can't compete militarily with the US, they can really play that card in a very, very effective way. My sense is that, you know, the invasion of Kharg Island is highly unlikely to happen unless the U.S. feels so desperate that there are no other alternatives available to them. There are other smaller islands that are disputed between Iran and the UAE, the two Tomb Islands and Abu Musa, which don't have oil reserves, but they have strategic significance, and less risky for the U.S. forces to land there and declare that they are invaded that island. But even that would escalate the war to such degree that it would be out of control of any of the players who are now engaged in this war.
Behruz, Iran's president, Pezeshkian, sent a letter to the American people hours before President Trump gave his speech last night, asking if this war is putting America first. Tell us who, where Pezeshkian is. Where does he fit into
Really,
what's
America
happening
first
right now?
Which, by the way, the phrase America first came about during World War II. It was an argument for America to not get involved. And it wasn't until the bombing of Pearl Harbor where the U.S. was forced into conflict. And they probably wouldn't have unseated Hitler. They probably wouldn't have joined the Western Front War if Hitler hadn't have come out and said that the U.S. is also one of their enemies. So that shows really, that should be concerning to everyone, that the U.S. was very determined to stay out of that war when there was all of these atrocities happening, because they didn't view fascism as being that bad. Truly.
Pezeshkian was quite an unlikely
At least a good
candidate to become
majority of
Iran's
people.
president. He was a member of the Iranian parliament, and when he nominated himself to run again for re-election, the government basically disqualified him from running for the parliament. But a year later, he was qualified to run for the president. So,
I need to
so
step
you
out
get
for
the
a sec.
picture that
I'm
how
gonna keep this
unlikely president
Juniper
he
will keep you
is.
company.
And
I'll be right
and
back.
He is not the key decision maker in Iran at this point, but he has a very important role in keeping the entire political system on the same level, and he's a good communicator with Iranian people. He's a man of the people, so to speak, and And I think that his discourse, his political conversation with Iranians, although he comes across as a very naive kind of politician, but nevertheless, I think he's opening some space for his political position
Why
inside
hasn't
the country.
Israel tried to kill him? I mean, they've killed so many of Iran's leaders, one after another.
Do you really want me to speculate on that? I don't know. But I mean, I think, first of all, they've tried to kill him. He was injured in June attacks. And he was severely injured, and he was limping for a while after June war. And they did try to kill him. I don't know how they are keeping him safe at this moment. But nevertheless, you know, Israel did try to kill him. And I think that he is not in that position of game changer in Iran at this point. Israel and the U.S. are mostly attacking, Israelis mostly, are attacking people who are in the position of game changing, like Ali Larijani, or I read yesterday that they attacked Kamal Kharrazi, who was the former foreign minister in Iran, and he's severely injured.
Do you think the Supreme Leader Moshtaba is in the country? Do you think he's alive?
I don't know. I don't know. And I think that it's possible that they're playing this kind of game with Moshtaba, that you know, he's acting as a hidden imam, because that hidden imam has a very significant role in Shi'i theology, and whether or not he's injured and he can't appear in public, or this is a political game to keeping him hidden, I'm not quite sure, but we'll find out soon.
And Spencer, just to go back to the speech and Trump's kind of shifting objectives for this war, one of the things he said is that he terminated what he called the disaster of the 2015 nuclear deal because it sent billions and billions of dollars to Iran. First of all, if you could explain that. But then he said nothing at all about the fact that just in this week, he allowed Iran to sell oil, thereby enabling Iran to earn billions and billions of dollars.
Yeah, so let's peek behind what actually is going on here, because going back to the 2015 deal, one of its primary terms was that Iran would get out from under the sanctions regime that was put in place precisely to have leverage in order to produce the nuclear deal. And that reaped Iran something around $1 billion worth of sanctions relief. That was its own money that the United States had basically frozen. The rejectionists for this deal, the people who would never allow this deal to get to yes, precisely so it would take away the option of attacking Iran militarily, raised an enormous hue and cry about how now this was funding the so-called terrorist regime in Iran. What Trump has done to reassure the markets after launching this very ill-thought-out war was provide for Iran to sell oil once again. Oil, of course, is a global commodity. It can't really be throttled in one place or another without affecting the price everywhere. And so now Iran stands to benefit by the terms of the current price of oil that Trump and Israel have forced to go up, something like $13 to $14 billion, vastly, vastly beyond the sanctions relief they got in the 2015 deal.
And if you could also, this was a very crucial point and has been a major issue in the war, Iran using the Strait of Hormuz to retaliate against Israel and the U.S. Last night, Trump claimed that the Strait of Hormuz would, quote, automatically open once the U.S. leaves, and simultaneously urge countries reliant on oil from the region to go to the strait and, quote, just take it. And he also urged countries, of course, to buy U.S. oil instead. So your response to that, and in particular this idea of the Strait of Hormuz, which for the longest time he was saying that's one of the objectives, we have to have this strait open, despite the fact that prior to the war the strait was open, so he's trying to resolve an issue that the war itself created. did. And the fact of, the implications of Iran's effective blockade of the Strait, which we're already seeing the effect in so many parts of the world.
You can see how even just summarizing the circumstance brings out not just the absurdity, but the tragedy and the horror of the misjudgment that this war is predicated upon. The most important thing to understand about the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important energy and commercial waterways, is that Trump has no military way of forcing it open. Everything that he is about to do, the war crimes that he has promised, when we hear both him and the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, talk about destroying Iran's defense industrial base, what they mean is they will bomb every civilian industrial target that they can find, much as they bombed the girls' school at the outset of the war, and claim this is some kind of military target. All of this is going to be designed to force enough pain on the Islamic Republic that it opens the Strait of Hormuz back up. That's because there is no way that the United States has to force it otherwise.
I want to ask you, Spencer, about the role of Israel. Does Trump's incoherence, and let's make no mistake about it, when someone is completely unpredictable, that gives them a great amount of power. But does that chaos serve Israel? And what is the relationship here with Israel fighting this war on so many fronts, attacking Iran, attacking Lebanon, moving higher and higher into Lebanon, and of course, continuing to kill people in Gaza, and a number of Palestinians have been killed in the West Bank during this time?
Starting around the time of the Israeli assassinations in 2024, spilling out from the Israeli genocide in Gaza, a great deal of people within Israel and within Israel's support base inside the United States believed that they had an opportunity to transform the Middle East by permanently disabling or at least structurally weakening Iranian power, not only in its broader ambits in Lebanon, in Syria, in Yemen, and in Iraq, but now in Iran itself. That's what Israel is going for. Israel is not simply going for a weakening of Iran. What it was hoping to do was collapse the Islamic Republic and bring Iran into some sort of failed state situation. Some of the indications from media and from political statements from Israel seem to indicate that they know they can't bring Trump into that open-ended conflict that would give them the leverage to do that. I think one of the things they're trying to leverage through that is an overwhelming focus on the front in Iran to give them cover to seize Lebanon south of the Litani River.
Already they're up to they're aiming for the Zahrani north of Litani.
And they're killing, I think they've killed something like 1,300 people. They're trying to transform not only the boundaries, not only the shape of the state of Israel, but establish Israel as the only real regional superpower, displacing Iran. I don't think that will work. I think what we've learned is that for better or for worse, I will leave Beirut to describe the cleavages within Iran and how the Islamic Republic relates to its own people. But nevertheless, the Islamic Republic has proven not only its resiliency beyond what Israeli and American war planners have thought, but it's shown that its strategy for defending itself and for inflicting pain on the broader American and Israeli coalition in the Gulf is undisturbed by what Iran and by what the United States and Israel have thrown at it for a month.
And okay, that is a key question. You're a journalist, Spencer, so let's put that question to Beirut. Is what's happening to the population of Iran? Also, is the internet still largely out? How do people communicate with each other, with the outside world? But the rifts, the fissures within the Iranian Republic right now, and where does the resistance stand?
The Iranian society has been quite a vibrant society in the past 40 years. Iranian society has always been engaged in a very meaningful struggle to expand civil liberties, to create a space for breathing simply, and for the space for struggle for social justice.
You yourself were a part of that.
Of course, and that never ended, and it continued. And and people gained a lot of grounds and lost a lot of grounds. And one of the I think one of the most tragic consequences of this war is that this war destroyed that space within which people struggled for this transformation of Iranian society. And I always say that we need to de-link this war from the situation of repression in Iran and the question of social justice in Iran, because this war has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the question of, violations of human rights or civil liberties in Iran. It has nothing to do with that at all. And what this war is doing, and I want to pick up on something that you mentioned and Spencer mentioned at the beginning, that this war is normalizing different kind of conversation about how wars are fought, and I think this war began, I think, in Gaza with the Israelis' attempt to basically openly, blatantly, flagrantly violating all rule-based conditions of fighting a war. And this was a genocide openly done and even posted on social media, and the world stood silently, and not only stood silently but also helped Israel to carry out that genocide. And I think now we witness, and it's not a coincidence that Trump openly talks about war crimes from the podium at the White House, and no one actually says anything about it, because he's openly advocating war crimes by attacking civilian infrastructure, sources of energy, water salination in Iran. And so I think this is a very, very important point, that we should not allow the normalization of that kind of discourse.
Well, before we conclude, Behrooz, I'd like to go to comments made by the anthropologist at Johns Hopkins University, Narges Bajogli, in her recent piece in Foreign Affairs magazine headlined, "Iran's Long Game." She wrote, quote, "In the Iran-Iraq war, the loss of commanders had created dangerous vulnerabilities for Tehran. To avoid the same result during a U.S. or Israeli campaign, over the past 4 decades, the regime has deliberately decentralized its military command, distributed political authority across regional nodes that can operate autonomously, and cultivated multiple potential successors at every level of the IRGC and the governing establishment." So that's Nargis in Foreign Affairs.
That's what they are describing as like a mosaic of structure, that the Iranian system, how they built things, how they're functioning, is meant to continue on even if a leader is taken out. And we see the evidence of this. It's been very effective.
Could you talk about what the implications of that are in terms of regime change?
Regime change, it basically is a shibboleth that Trump is using, and it's totally meaningless at this point.
Also, how they were talking about war crimes, Trump saying or mentioning war crimes when he is addressing the nation should be very concerning to all of us. But the reason he feels like he can do this, that there won't be any consequences for him, is because with the Iraq war, nothing happened with those war criminals, George W. Bush, Dick Cheney. Dick Cheney died of old age. So, hi, buddy. He's coming in. Hi. Oh, no, he's not. Okay, bye. What was I saying? Oh yeah, because the war on terror, the Iraq war that was completely immoral and unwarranted, that people who instigated that were not held accountable. So he feels like Trump, that he can do whatever he wants because he also has not been held accountable for his other crimes.
It's very clear that the Islamic Republic has created at least 4 levels of replacement possibilities, and not only militarily, they have trained and put in place commanders that can take over in the matter of minutes, but also politically, they have given governors of different states full political autonomy. In case of the collapse of the central government, they are in the position of making independent decisions to carry on their political responsibilities. So the idea of regime change and the possibility of it is so remote, and I think that has become very clear for Trump administration and for the Israelis, who basically don't have a plan for regime change. They want a plan for a failed state, not a regime
I want to
change.
ask about another Nargis Mohammadi, the Nobel Peace Prize winner. I want to ask about Evin, a place you know well. You're on death row in Evin prison. Are you afraid that Iran or the U.S. or Israel will bomb Evin, where Nargis and so many other dissidents are?
I think Nargis Mohammadi is not in Evin at this point. They transferred her to a different town, but that's always the fear that you know, I said that this war doesn't have anything to do with the question of social justice and civil liberties in Iran, and people who are inside prison are not basically people this war wants to protect, and these are people who are trying to promote and fight on behalf of social justice and civil liberties. So if they bomb the prison, I think that would be consistent with the way this war has been carried out.
Spencer, 30 seconds.
This war is already lost. I don't know how long it will go on, but Iran has so thoroughly...
Someone who really understands how to keep things concise and to the point. This war is already lost. Love.
outfoxed the United States, that you heard Trump say he is willing to walk away from a conflict he began without reopening the Strait of Hormuz. That is not how winners operate, just to be really frank about it. If the United States leaves the Strait of Hormuz closed or basically throttled in the possession of the Iranians will have reset the terms of the Middle East and quite possibly with spillage effects on the entire global economy. That is a recipe for returning to war, not ending it.
Exactly.
Well, we have so much more to talk about, but we have to end it now. The conversation continues. Spencer Ackerman, Pulitzer Prize-winning, National Magazine Award-winning reporter, will link to your newsletter, Forever Wars. And Behrouz Gamari Tabrizi, fellow at the Center for Peace, Culture, and Politics at the CUNY Graduate Center. Latest book, The Long War on Iran. New events, old questions. Everyone should read it. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, that looks
Now on
really
YouTube.
good.
Subscribe to the channel and turn...
Okay. So, continuing on, covering this illegal, immoral, unconscionable war against Iran at the behest of Israel to have more glory, I guess, for Trump and his cronies. They have an interesting way of going about it. You would think that, you know, like actually getting people what they need, that would make for a better legacy, engender a lot of well wishes from the populace. Like, constituents would be grateful to be helped. That is a great way to gain favorability, popularity, to ensure your legacy. We see that with Zoran Mamdani, that because he has been working on behalf of people and doing the sewer socialism that makes it so that people are getting their material conditions bettered, it leads to popularity. Just saying. Okay, this is a CNN panel. I know, CNN panels. I might not watch all of this, depending on how it goes. This is a reaction to Trump's Iran war address. I have not seen the address, but I have seen clips of it. I am curious to hear what they have to say. We'll
then it
see
came
where
out,
this
he
goes.
said that one thing he wanted to do was lay out why it's necessary for safety and security of Americans that this is happening. Do you think he made that case?
I thought he started with the necessity. We talked about you need necessity, the objective, then what's the plan. I thought the necessity, laying out the bill of particulars on Iran, was fairly effective, not entirely accurate, as you just pointed out. I think it's important to remind people of what Iran is about. It is a real threat. There are reasons to be doing what we're doing. I thought when he laid out the objectives and the plan, I don't think we heard too much. And my takeaway was that we might be in for an escalation of this war. I mean, he said if there's not a deal, he put back on the table.
He didn't talk about a deal very much.
Well, he said there's not a deal. The energy.
No, he said we're going to bomb them into the Stone Age like they deserve, which is a really fucked up thing to say, to be clear.
Targets, everything else he'd been talking about. So if we thought we might hear a de-escalatory speech that we're going to wrap this up in a couple weeks, I actually heard something quite different. That, and he said he visits the families at Dover, and he said we must honor them by completing the mission. And then he basically threatened Iran that we're going to prepare to send you back to the Stone Age. So I think this war is going to continue for some time. I mean, that's what I heard.
I thought it was striking that while he had a chance to speak to the Iranian leadership, the replaced Iranian leadership, he did not make an offer or any discussion of what the U.S.-Iran relationship could look like. I mean, these are two countries that have every reason that they could be natural allies. Historically, at various moments, long time ago, they were. But there was only threat to the Iranian leadership. There was no incentive. I thought the second really interesting thing was that the president basically dismissed the operations to go get the nuclear material. You may remember that when this war started, that was supposed to be the #1 objective: keep Iran from making a bomb. And that means taking away the near bomb grade material. This time he said it would take months for them to get near the nuclear dust.
I mean, just last Monday, a little over a week ago, I asked the president about getting that enriched uranium, and he said that it would be very easy for the United States to go in and get it.
No.
The other thing here is the Strait of Hormuz. The president seemed to back up and confirm reporting there that he's not interested in the United States having control of it or having that settled if the United States does end this war.
Well, and that's inconsistent. I mean, one thing he complained about the Obama administration and sanctions relief and everything, but if Iran comes out of this controlling the Strait of Hormuz and being able to meter ships that go through there and taking a cut of every
I'm gonna
ship,
get more water.
they're going to
I'll
make
be right
hundreds
back.
of millions and billions of dollars. So that, if that is the outcome here strategically, that is not good if our objective is to contain Iran. Yeah, he called on our allies to come in and help in the Strait, and we might be willing to help. But I heard him say we kind of would lead that mission from behind, hoping that our allies might step up, which I'm not sure they're going to do. Look, it's a difficult mission. He said it's easy. It's not. You got to have assets that can, Caitlin, shoot down anti-ship missiles and drones. It's hard. I mean, we did this in the Red Sea with a small coalition. It's a very difficult military mission and strategic equation. And the way we're talking about our allies every day, I don't see the allies really signing up to take on this mission. They should. I mean, they should. It is in their interest to do it. We should stay on them. But I think the Strait of Hormuz remains a very unresolved issue here. I didn't really hear an answer.
Well, I mean, if what Brett's hearing is that there's a potential escalation here. The president talked to Americans about rising gas prices, but he said that they would come down after the war is over. I mean, if the war is going on for 2 to 3 more weeks, maybe longer than that, do you think that that was sufficient?
Well, they're going to start to come down. I think he's right to recognize it. He's trying to show the American public that he hears their anxiety about it. And I do think gas prices are going to be one of the drivers of public opinion on the war. I think Brett's right about what he said about the allies, though. He called on our allies to come in and take over the Strait and deal with the Strait. Now, he's mostly talking about Japan and Korea. Both of them get about half their oil and gas through the Strait of Hormuz. But he's also talking about Europe. And I think the heads of state of our NATO allies need to have heard this message pretty loud and clear. We've maintained bases in their countries. We've fueled their economies. We've protected them from Russia for 75 years. And they wouldn't let us use our own bases in their country to engage in our national security here. And I think that, I'm a big supporter of NATO. Most Republican senators I talk to are as well. But I think there's a real schism here. And I think if our allies they need to hear the president tonight. And it's time to get on the horse and ride.
Well, I should know, the president saying that he could withdraw from NATO. It was his Secretary of State who did co-sponsor a bill saying the president can't unilaterally do so. He needs Congress to help him. Karen, overall, not just on NATO, what do you think Americans heard in that speech 1 month in?
Look, if you are concerned about your own pocketbooks, and let's be honest, that's what most Americans were probably listening for. They're listening for, how's this going to affect my life, my economy? You weren't reassured. I mean, as Brett pointed out, if we're talking about an escalation, he's talking about 2 to 3 more weeks. Then we're looking at, and he said this was going to be over in 4 weeks. Then we're talking 7 to 8 weeks. And the kind of escalation he was talking about doesn't sound like it's just going to be 2 to 3 more weeks. I mean, we're sort of joking about this. Everything's 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks, 2 more weeks. So that's a concern. And even in his conversation about the economy, he said, oh, it was so great a month ago. No, it wasn't. People were, I mean, his numbers on the economy have been going down steadily for quite some time. So I don't think people heard anything to make them feel reassured about why did we have to do this right now. I know he said, tried to make this imminent argument, but again, the fact checkers will, I think, correct that. And he did not make a case he didn't call people to action, to be a part of this. He really tried to, and I don't think people are going to believe that just because he says it should be over, that everything all of a sudden is going to go back to normal. I don't think people buy that.
In terms of a deal being reached, the president has been pretty optimistic about it this week in conversations with reporters. Tonight, though, he didn't announce a breakthrough. He kind of barely addressed the diplomatic talks that are underway, and as Brett McGurk was noting, he threatened to blast Iran back to the Stone Ages should this not work out. How do you think that comes across to the Iranian officials that were listening?
Well, look, I mean, I spoke to Iranian officials earlier on today, and they said they didn't put much stead in the public remarks of President Trump because they don't reliably reflect what actually happens. And they went on to say this reflects a trait of him, that he is eccentric and unpredictable, which of course we all know. But I mean, there's been a physical response as well to this speech in the region, with alarms going off and missiles and drones being launched by Iran across the region, particularly at the United Arab Emirates. Within the past few minutes, we've had those reports coming in of attacks from Iran again against those surrounding Gulf Arab states that have been so terribly battered in the course of the past month or so since this Iran war began. These are energy-rich countries that depend almost entirely on energy exports for their survival, and they've seen those revenues because of the blockade in the Strait of Hormuz and because of the attacks on the energy infrastructure absolutely sort of devastated, dropping from billions of dollars a day in some cases to close to zero. And so we're looking at an existential economic crisis for this region. And there was very little in terms of reassurance in that speech by President Trump. He talked about potentially escalating the conflict. He's continuing it. Certainly there was no word on when this conflict would come to a conclusion. And in so much as he did address that, I think we're all left with the impression that at the end of this conflict, we could see an Iran which is strengthened strategically, that will keep the Strait of Hormuz under its control, and possibly even have the capability to have ballistic missiles and even a nuclear program at the end of this war. And so that's very alarming
as they should.
For the countries in this region.
As they fucking should. Truly, the only way to avoid imperialist aggression from the US or Israel, other warmongering nations like Russia, it is to get a nuke, to have a nuke. That is why the US desperately does not want Iran to have a nuke, because then they understand that they can't go in and mess with things. Okay, so continuing the theme of the fascists falling apart, we love to see it. Their coalition is breaking up. Things are happening in a very disastrous way electorally, along with the war effort domestically. Things are expensive. People are upset. People are being terrorized, kidnapped, trafficked to concentration camps where people are dying. Things are bleak for the common person in the good old United States of America. So there's a reason why approval is slumping. I wanted to watch this by Miss Never. That's what I call MS Now. It's not that clever, but I like to pretend it is. We'll watch this about his ratings.
Approval rating has hit a new low for a second term. According to a new CNN SSRS poll, President Trump's approval is at 35%. 64% of Americans disapprove of his performance. The president's handling of the economy, even worse. Only 31% of Americans approve of the way he has handled the economy. 27% approve of Trump's handling of inflation, and 24% approve of his handling of gas prices. Nearly 80% describe the economic conditions of the country today as poor. Roughly 6 in 10 people say they expect the economy to still be in poor condition a year from now. And about the same number feel Trump's policies have made the economy worse. The price at the pump has caused a severe or moderate financial hardship for more than 60% of those surveyed in this CNN poll. And a majority of people say recent economic conditions have led them to change their grocery buying habits, cut back on spending, and to limit how much they drive. So, Jonathan, John
can
Heilman,
confirm.
those are just the latest numbers that tell a story of what's going on with real people in this country and the impact that the war that the president was talking about last night has had on it. He was dismissive of the gas price spike over $4 a gallon now last night, saying those are short-term increases. Once I'm done with this war in 2 weeks, again, they'll go right back to where they were. So is there any recognition or acknowledgement beyond the military strategy of the political and economic consequences, the suffering that's happening in this country and the impact that it's having on this president?
Well, clearly not, Willie. I mean, beyond the economics of this, right, which you guys were alluding to a little earlier, we live in a global, of all the markets in the world, the energy market is about as globalized as any market there is. So, there's no one who's an expert in that sector who won't tell you that the president's argument, which is we have all the oil we need in the United States. It's the biggest oil producer in the world. And so therefore the Europeans should deal with the Strait of Hormuz because that's where they get their oil. We have our oil. No, it's a global market in oil. And so if you have a cutoff if you have the Strait of Hormuz choked off, doesn't matter whether we have a lot of oil in the United States, the price for oil rises around the world. And the fact that Donald Trump didn't lay out a clear path to exit, you're already seeing reflected in the futures this morning in terms of the stock market. What does all that tell you, though? It comes back to the question that John Lemire raised earlier, which is, what was the point of this speech, politically speaking? If you're sitting in the White House right now, you put the president on a primetime address.
I think it was to satisfy the traders and stockbrokers. It's about Wall Street because this president pays more attention to the stock market than any other president. And he is constantly saying like, oh, we won the war, or it only lasts a couple more days, because he is trying to quell these fears of these traders, and they were able to see through the bullshit.
This is another thing that is not, I still don't think has changed in our politics. To Joe's point earlier about the Constitution.
I mean, they've been very subservient in listening to him before this.
To say something new.
To their detriment.
Announce that you're doing something, to make a case for doing something else, to address some change in the situation on the ground. There was literally nothing that Donald Trump said last night that we haven't heard from Donald Trump about Iran over the course of not just the last 4 weeks, but over the course of the last 4 days. Many of those things are contradictory. And internally inconsistent. What he says about it, I mean, you literally could headline that story. Donald Trump threatens to escalate the war while telling us he's getting out soon at the same time. If you were a political operative in the White House, what was, you go into a speech like that, you say, we have one objective, we're driving one headline. It's absolutely unclear to me that there is anything that he said last night that will do anything to mitigate or ameliorate.
Hey, Drunk Saint, welcome. Previous circles online that wholeheartedly supported Trump now hate him. No, it's true. Hey. It's so true. I will lurk occasionally in like the right-wing media sphere, and let me tell you, most of the comments are pretty negative against the administration. They are hemorrhaging support. It is concerning that they just don't give a shit, that public opinion is not mattering to them. It shows how insulated they are, how comfortable they are, how people historically have not been held accountable in positions of power, that they feel very safe. So this is not looking good for the administration, which is great for all of us. But we do have to acknowledge that as this decline is happening, continuing to happen, that he will get more erratic and violent and lash out. I'm very concerned still that he's going to nuke Iran or somewhere in the world before he dies, just to avoid any sort of consequences. His clear messing with the market has been way too obvious. Yeah, it's like this was the last straw, I think, for Wall Street. They were like, okay, we've been listening to you saying that prices will be okay, that the war is going to end. And there's a reason why the market just slumped after this speech, because he's like, we're going to stay, but then we're going to escalate, but then we're going to leave, and it's going to be over soon. That's like, what? What the fuck is happening? It really, I think, was meant to make it so they aren't nervous, the stock traders, but it did the opposite. Dementia Don, he's falling, he's in decline, not fast enough, but this is a good turn of events.
The political free fall that he's in right now, that we just heard Willie go through in those CNN poll numbers, which are consistent with all the poll numbers that we've seen over the course of the last week.
Yeah.
Not a thing, Joe.
That may be the case regarding the polls. I will say what the president did was, for the first time, he addressed this war to the American people. I think that's important in and of itself, and everybody else in the media has been saying the president needs to speak to the American people, and he did say a few things that maybe just as a former Republican, as a conservative, he said a few things that I thought, again, that I'd heard from people who've been in the intel community and who knew Iran very well for decades. One of those things he said was, we can never have a nuclear Iran. They have been the epicenter of terrorism since 1979. We needed to go in and do it. Presidents before me have been kicking the can.
Honestly, I think the epicenter of terrorism is just the heart of empire, the imperial core, if you will, the U.S., and also we have to include Israel, because it's obvious that between the U.S. and Israel, there are way more acts of terrorism that are happening around the world, and that there are terrorist movements that people are qualifying as terrorism in the Middle East because of this imperialist aggression. So how about we reduce terrorism in the world by reducing imperial violence? That's a thought. Also, I just finished. I'm gonna tie this off. Just I don't know if you can even see it, but it's just a monochrome green bracelet. Anyway.
And down the road, we can't continue kicking the can down the road. So that set that up. And he also did say we are going to achieve most of the military objectives that we set out to achieve at the beginning of this war. What was not said, of course, was what would happen with the Strait, what would happen with the nuclear material, what would happen with some of these things that you brought up. But I bet the president's continuing to do two things at once. And again, John, he holds his cards very closely to his vest. One thing he's saying is that we're going to wind down this war 2 to 3 weeks. He's been saying that for quite some time, but I suspect as the economic pain continues, that 2 to 3 weeks, at some point in the future, will actually be 2 to 3 weeks. The second thing he's doing is saying,
Junk Saint, I'm curious where you have also seen these online circles start to not support Trump.
An evil regime, as many people have called the Iranians, and then they could just sit and wait. Instead, he's saying, we're going to be out in 2 to 3 weeks. We're also going to hammer them harder than ever
4chan.
before.
4chan?
And I suspect that's for negotiating
They're
purposes.
against him on 4chan?
This is my question to you, though. And it's speculation.
What?
It's going to be speculation on your part.
This is my shocked face.
And my part, but we've known
Oh,
this president directly
he
or
is
indirectly,
done. He's done for.
Politician for over the past
Holy
2 years.
shit.
He's not been a guy that has been willing to take political
Damn.
pain. Just hasn't.
That's great, though.
It's bob and weave, jab in the face.
Now let's just
pull
hope
back,
these people
sort of
don't
Muhammad Ali when he's
migrate
dancing
further
around,
right, which is a
somebody that's in the
possibility.
ring. I have been surprised at the amount of political pain he's been willing to tolerate.
It would help if we
for this
had
war.
an
And my
opposition party,
speculation has
supposed
been,
opposition
he knows
party
he's
that was
gonna lose
more
the midterm.
robust
He
and had like
wants the
populist
toppling of Iran
sentiment
to be his
to
legacy,
actually
along
help
with the
people's
toppling
lives.
of Venezuela and the toppling of Cuba. And that's my
But that's
best
why we're
guess
seeing a
why
lot
he's
more
willing
progressive
to put up with
candidates.
high gas prices for another month or two. I'm curious if you've thought through this and why you think Donald Trump in 2026 is doing something that Donald Trump in 2018 would have never done.
Yeah. Joe, it's a great question. And I think, what we've seen, I think, over the course of the first, whatever it is now, 14 months of Trump 2.0, is that he has become increasingly detached from political reality.
Aw.
President Trump.
I don't think that's silly. It's like we need to find the inspiration where we can. Trying to take lessons from Tolkien. Yeah, not being defeatist, he was very optimistic. There's always hope and outside factors at play. True. Yeah, it can be hard to maintain a realistic, informed perspective while also having revolutionary optimism. That really is the question. Hamlet was wrong. That's the question. How do we maintain revolutionary opposition? I mean, revolution. No. I'm all over the place. Revolutionary optimism to be in opposition against the oppressive forces that be. Because things are pretty rough. Things are pretty rough. We are definitely not out of this situation, but luckily, I think there are more people than ever, like us everyday people, who are more willing to address what is happening and actually fight back, hopefully. At least that's what I tell myself. All of us trying to maintain our hope and optimism.
Whatever you think of him ideologically or in terms of policy, he has always had a very good fingertip feel for his political standing. He's had a particularly good fingertip feel for his standing with his political base. And one of the things we're seeing right now is obviously the kind of splintering of that base. It's been building over the course of the last 14 months. As
Yes,
Trump
it
has been
started
increasingly
with
pictured
the Epstein
to the
files,
MAGA base
in my
as someone
opinion.
who's just another politician, spending a lot of time with billionaires. The Epstein thing was a betrayal. And now the walking away from his 10 years of saying, I am an anti-war president, not just first in Venezuela and now most dramatically in Iran. He's, John Lemire's someone who's pointed this out as much as almost anybody I know. Donald Trump is just not out among the people very much. The people of his party, the people of his coalition, and it feels as though
because he's
not
dying.
maybe even listening very much to MAGA media, which is turned together. Laura Ingram's on Fox News now, Joe, suggesting that Donald Trump may not have the mental capacity.
Laura Ingram is saying that? Okay. The fascists really are falling apart way more than I was even originally thinking. This is great. But we need to make it so that these people aren't captured by even more fascist forces.
To understand the foreign policy advice he's getting, that is a sign of a rupture that has something to do with the fact that Trump is looking more and more like a lame duck.
Hello.
J.D. Vance now announcing that he's leaking to the press like crazy that he was never for Iran, and now he's got a memoir coming out about his Catholic faith. We are into the 2028 presidential cycle now.
Because that's what the world needs. The world needs another, I'm not going to call it literature. The world needs another slop book from J.D. fucking Vance, because we can trust what he says. We know that's the truth. Jesus. Yeah, he has been very silent with all of this happening. He has not been at the forefront defending what is going on, and his one appearance talking about like gas prices and stuff, it went horribly for him. He has no charisma. He is the least appealing person ever. One of them. I guess he shouldn't win anything. So I'm not going to have him win that. He's one of the most like revolting people because there is no authenticity there. He's not genuine. He is just bought and sold. Peter Thiel's lapdog.
That Donald Trump on
We
some
know
level,
this.
the combination of detachment and the sense of kind of fatalism about what's going to happen. And if he's going to save himself in the midterms, save the party in the midterms, he's going to have to do it through things like the SAVE Act and maybe, with all this increasing talk, deploying ICE to polling places. Those are the only... He's not going to be able to turn this around.
That's why
in a
he's not
conventional
afraid,
political way.
because
The one
he's
thing I
in
think he
charge
still knows.
and is not afraid of violence.
I think he also knows that doing those things, ICE, to voting booths and what he's trying to do with the SAVE Act, is not going to go through. It's going to backfire. I think he's more setting up the argument after the losses. And
Does he know that?
For that. I do think, though,
I wouldn't be so confident,
this is,
Joe.
at the end of the day, about legacy. And what Donald Trump sees regarding the MAGA base is he sees a CNN poll that was out last time that showed 100% of the MAGA base still supported him. MAGA media, a lot of MAGA media does not support him. I suspect, though, those are self-identified.
Yeah, Alex Jones. Alex fucking Jones is like, he's looking old. His brain looks like he's not doing too hot. Yeah, he's done a lot for us, but I'm worried. That's like, who does he have left? It's all the billionaires. That's who. And Congress and the Supreme Court, because they've effectively captured all of these branches of government. I don't know about Alex Jones thing. Yeah. I mean, with all of these people, I don't think we should trust that they're like officially breaking away. I think they are more just responding to their audience because they don't seem to have any sort of like moral compass, that rather than them coming to these conclusions themselves, they're probably seeing like the comments and the ratings and they're like, oh, like, I can't go against all of my viewership because then I'm out of a job. That's what I am thinking. The audience does change the leader. Like, looking at Fox News, we saw it with Hitler. Exactly. This is why public opinion does matter. It's concerning that they aren't listening to it, but it does have an effect. We see that on Fox News, like looking at their comments, almost every single comment, especially when it comes to the war and the Epstein files, are all like, just like making jokes about it. Of like, oh, so we're going to leave? Wait, I thought they were destroyed. Wait, who's in the Trump files now? Like, that's happening all over Fox News comments. So, like, they can't run away from it. It's interesting.
MAGA voters.
We'll see where it goes.
There may have been more MAGA voters in the past that now do not identify themselves as MAGA voters, and perhaps that's why that number is still sitting at 100%. Regardless, there obviously is a split in the MAGA, or we will say slash, they call themselves conservatives. They're anything but conservative, but just for the purposes of this show,
yeah,
I will say
what are they
quote,
conserving?
Conservative coalition, a real split right now down the middle about this war in Iraq.
Yeah, I think it's becoming more and more clear that President Trump is looking sort of beyond the horizon and is focused on legacy building, right? He does want to be, as we've talked about,
if he nukes
the person
Iran,
who has
it would be
overthrows
over.
Venezuela,
he won't do
Iran,
it. I bet
Cuba, clearly next. And he's also trying to build
You
physical
think he
monuments
won't?
to himself. That's the White House ballroom. That's the arch that nobody wants. near the
I
Lincoln
think
Memorial.
he could.
That's the Kennedy
I'm
Center.
really concerned
The
about
list,
that.
Goes on and on.
That
and
as
on in
he
terms of what
is
he wants.
feeling this loss of power, I don't have 10 million. Like, damn, because not like we want any of this to happen. Yeah, I think that he is very unhinged and will do anything to avoid accountability because he's a narcissist, and that he will justify all sorts of violence if it means that, like, he doesn't have to face consequences or acknowledge that what he has done is, like, ruined the world. So I am still concerned about that. I really hope that doesn't happen, but yeah. He's old and obsessed with legacy. Yeah, that too. It's like the one thing that I think would stop him from using a nuke is because of people around him being like, that would leave a bad legacy. There's an argument for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's something to both of those points. But yeah, I really hope that doesn't happen. I just wouldn't put it past him.
To construct. But Richard Haass, right now, his party is going to be potentially left with a disastrous November, especially if this war does continue for a long time, and it may. So let's return to where things are. Last night's speech didn't really move the needle much. Let's throw out the timeline. The president has a significant decision on his hands. We know if you cut and run now, the Strait of Hormuz will remain closed, or at least Iran will have real power over it. That's bad for the global economy. But if he sends in ground troops, the options I outlined earlier, the islands,
Iran having control isn't bad for the economy.
Risky.
The fact that it's shut is. Stephen Miller, Alex Karp, the billionaires are concerning. Yeah. And honestly, I think Stephen Miller is like one of the few people he's actually listening to right now, because we see that he fired Pam Bondi. So they're falling apart. Not fast enough again, but yeah, the Stephen Miller aspect I think is really concerning, and the Pete Hegseth stuff, because Pete Hegseth has, like, when he was in the Iraq war, he like kept trying to convince troops to like ignore orders, and then he like advocated for, like, after, like, he's been very outspoken of like, all these rules hinder war fighters. That's like, yeah, it's so you don't do war crimes. And still, you did war crimes, and we did war crimes. Yeah, all of these people are drunk on power and extremely violent and fascist. Like, that's how you know it's fascism, is like the abject violence is deeply fascist.
First and foremost for the American soldiers who will be put in harm's way, but it's also very risky politically here at home for the president and his party, because the American public have made it clear they don't want that.
100%. At the end of the day, there's two big issues here. Keeps coming back to the same two. One is the nuclear, one is the Strait of Hormuz. Those are the two outstanding issues. I'm not convinced there's a military solution, certainly to the nuclear issue. I do think we're going to have to get back to some awkward negotiations where we're not going to, quote unquote, solve the issue, finish the job, awkward realities. And then the question of the Strait. And it's not clear how taking islands is going to solve the issue, whether it's Karg or the smaller islands. Escorting tankers is a loser of an idea. I've proposed the idea of a blockade outside. Strait needs to be open for all or close to all to put pressure on Iran. Maybe there's some new kind of authority we set up with the local states, and maybe Iran could participate in that. The idea that you would charge a fee and it would be distributed among the local countries. But one, either militarily or diplomatically, we need a proposal to open the straits. It cannot last. This is unacceptable for the region and for the world. And what was so odd about last night, on neither the nuclear issue nor the Strait issue did the president have anything to say. It goes back to John Heilman's point. If you're going to get prime time, by the way, the first night of Passover, it was a strange night to do a major speech from the Oval Office.
That should be the name of my
set a new
memoir, talking about straight conditioning growing up
more weeks of
in Utah.
On Iran is not going to change the basic decisions either on Iran's side or ours. So the president says he doesn't want to kick the can down the road. Last night, he kicked the can down the road.
Right.
All right. Low approval. We love to see it. Okay. So this was recommended yesterday, Turd Bomb, by you, if you're still here. The J.D. Vance segment by John Oliver. I have not seen this, but speaking of JD Wet Rag Vance, I am curious to see this takedown because I love to see JD Vance bullied. That brings me joy. We need to take our wins where we can get them, right? And this, yeah, I'm glad that he's talking about this because we do need to be talking about it, of what the world would look like with JD Vance at the helm, how he's an isolationist, how he actually has an ideology. Trump is just completely corrupt. Oh, thank you for the gifted sub. I appreciate it. Amazing. You're the best. Love you. Yeah, we need to be talking about how JD Vance as a leader could be more dangerous than Trump when it comes to actually having a plan. He will do whatever Peter Thiel wants him to do, whereas Trump is selfish and stupid enough that, and corrupt enough, that he just kind of does what he wants, and then the people around him try to do damage control. But what I'm concerned about with JD Vance is that he will make the US into a North Korea type of situation where everyone is being forced to be Christian nationalists, which they're already on their way to doing. But anyway, let's won an Oscar. This is where we queer people, there is like a like the queer factions of online discourse. There are many people that try to pit Glenn Close and Meryl Streep against each other, but they're actually friends in real life because they have gone up against each other for movies a lot of times. And she has not won an Oscar yet. She has been in so many movies that have shaped the culture. It is really wild. But again, we can't like find any sort of genuine assessment of talent in these types of award systems. They're incestuous and bought and paid for. We know this. I love that he said Animorph. There are still many millennials on their writing team. I don't know if any of you have read the Animorph books. I fucking loved those. Those were fun. And you got to flip the pages and see a human turn into an animal slowly, and then like look at like the weirdest like phase of the shifting. Yeah, Peter Thiel, another South African Nazi. Because guess what? There were many Nazis that fled Germany to go to South Africa, who also helped to create apartheid. Wow, look what they're doing now, attempting to create global I love that they're dialing in on that word choice. That also was like, what? I mean, it's being sexist, it's demeaning, but I love this. She describing the word gal as breezy is so oh, so does that mean like Medicare for all, universal health care, universal child care, free transportation, free elder care, actually having community resources be distributed in an equitable manner? I mean, I don't think those are crazy, but he would think that was crazy. So why don't you apply the same logic? Just the hypocrisy of it all. That's just the through line with these people. Fascist extra, as opposed to the Democratic Party, which is fascist light. That is so racist to be saying that. Of like, oh, it's skyrocketed. And it's also queerphobic. It's racist and queerphobic. It's specifically anti-black because he is talking about Haitian migrants specifically.
John Oliver fuck.
Oh, it's an email. I'm gonna write this down because I want to email this and then let you all know. Okay. Has John Oliver fucked a couch at Has John Oliver fucked Couch.com. Okay. I have homework to do. There we go. My button was stuck on my microphone. Whoops. Also, where did this rumor come from? It's not like that kind of shit just gets made up about someone. I mean, that can happen. Like, we all know the cruelty of, like, growing up and going through puberty and stuff. But also, like, what a random thing. Like, it had to have happened. It had to have happened. Like, why else would there be so many rumors about that? And I mean, the opposite that he is not saying is that often husbands would kill their wives. That would happen very frequently. In fact, the highest way that people who are pregnant pass away is from interpartner violence. So not a whole lot changes. But he wants to go back to even more oppression.
But it gets
Yay.
even worse.
Okay. Moving along. I was going to show something about AOC finally coming out and saying that she will not have defensive weapons be sent to Israel, or not have, but like she's not going to vote for that. And that's great. That is an improvement. We're seeing some progress. We need to celebrate these wins. So apparently Pam Bondi is fired. Damn, there were so many things I was wanting to go over. What should we watch instead? Excuse me. The hiccups. Let's watch this about Pam Bondi, because I want to know more of the details.
Here's Nellie Jackson.
Good day. We are coming on the air with breaking news. President Trump has apparently fired his Attorney General, Pam Bondi, according to a senior administration official and a source familiar with the matter. This comes after NBC News learned that the president has grown frustrated with his Attorney General in recent days, according to multiple sources. I want to get right to our team covering all of it. Our Chief Justice and National Affairs correspondent Kelly O'Donnell is joining us. We've also got our White House correspondent Monica Alba as well. Kelly, let me start with you. This is not altogether surprising, considering the reporting from NBC that the president was frustrated with Bondi's performance leading the Department of Justice.
And we've often seen the president let some of his intentions, feelings, concerns bubble out publicly as one measure of how he makes these decisions. For Pam Bondi, this is a blow because she has been a very loyal sort of friend and ally of the president for a long time, going back to Florida,
He doesn't
assisting
have
in
friends.
the first Trump term. And this, in many ways, comes down to a representation of the frustration that President Trump has.
I mean, she's going to be replaced
that his
with
vision for
another
how
idiot
he could exact
who is a
retribution
criminal,
against political rivals and those who had, in his perception, done him wrong at some
good to
past
see.
point, to be brought to justice. That has not happened, even though this Department of Justice under Pam Bondi
look, the
has
two that were
attempted to do
ousted.
so in a
Who's
number of areas
next?
where we've seen the failed
Please
attempts to
be
prosecute
the
James
fascist in
Comey or
chief.
Letitia James. Then there's the broader issue of the Epstein files. There was a moment where Pam Bondi, who in the journey of her time as Attorney General has been both loyal but has also committed some self-inflicted errors, she talked about having the so-called Epstein list on her desk, and that never materialized. She had led people to believe there would be more coming on Epstein, and then initially last summer, the Department of Justice said the files would be closed. There was no action to be taken, and that triggered a groundswell that was a broader political coalition than you might expect, certainly those in the MAGA community, and then those who were very supportive of the survivor community around Epstein. Hallie, you've talked.
Honestly, I mean, I know Trump has been upset with her performance, but I thought that maybe Kash Patel would be leaving before Pam Bondi because Trump is very racist, and Pam and Cash have both been very similar in like their trajectory, in my opinion, and how they've been received among the public, especially the base. But I'm guessing that he is, well, the reason why I didn't think that she would be out before him is because she knew Jeffrey Epstein and was directly involved with Epstein in protecting him. It's like they have pictures together when they were younger, that like Trump would keep her around just for that reason, because she knows too much. I hope now, like, I doubt she will do any sort of sabotage on her way out, but I really hope she does. And maybe she won't, because she is involved with everything and would be exposing herself too. I really hope she leaks something.
Talked to a number of those survivors, and there was a political engine that developed around them, bringing it to a point where Congress required the Department of Justice to produce those files. They have done so, but only in a limited way. It has not been
fired
the full set of files.
Surprise.
So Pam Bondi has not been able to insulate the president from some of the criticism related to the Epstein ordeal. She has not been able to deliver
I am
some
guessing
of his
that
desired
Cash Patel will
prosecutions, and that frustration
Trump
has
has
apparently
also been
bubbled up.
talking
All the ways
about
in which
how
she has been loyal,
he is upset with him.
were certainly put in a back seat, and she was in the seat with him yesterday, going in the Beast, as it's known, the presidential limousine, to the Supreme Court to listen to one of the key ideas of his time in office, which is birthright citizenship that he wants to challenge. Apparently, she was unable to save herself in those personal, direct moments with the president. She attended his speech last night in the White House. So personal relationships only go so far. Loyalty is sometimes only one way when we observe Donald Trump. And Pam Bondi, Attorney General of the United States, is out. Hallie?
As we're looking at some of these images, Kelly, that video of the apparently now former Attorney General being seen with President Trump as he visited the Supreme Court yesterday. Let me bring in Monica Alba now. So the question is, who takes her place? This is an incredibly prominent cabinet position.
Yeah, he went to the Supreme Court yesterday to hear the case on birthright citizenship, essentially to intimidate the justices. And from what we have been hearing with reporting, that backfired. The justices were upset that he went, that he was trying to intimidate them, and also that their case was extremely poor. It made him look very bad, which is great. Woo!
Important to the functioning of the Trump administration. It is a department that the president has a personal interest in and has taken an interest in. We know that the Deputy Attorney General, Todd Blanche, has been somebody who has been vocal, who has been prominent on the airwaves. There's also some reporting that we have from sources that former Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin may also be in the mix.
Yeah, and of course, he is already in the cabinet, Lee Zeldin, Hallie, that you referenced there, as the EPA administrator. So he is somebody who could be potentially tapped for that. But it does appear now that the president spoke by phone with another outlet and seemed to confirm that Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General,
administrator and doesn't
would
know
now
anything
take
about
the place
environment.
of interim Attorney General, at least at this moment, while they do figure out this transition and before they do make any potential announcements. It is typical for the president of the United States to be the one that usually shares some of this information on Truth Social or in some kind of an appearance or announcement, but he has yet to do that. But as Kelly just pointed out, Pam Bondi has been a ubiquitous figure in this White House. She has attended many of the events. She has traveled with the president quite frequently. She's been at his side more than, of course, any other attorney general in recent memory. When you think about the sort of separation between the head of the Department of Justice and a White House,
where is
and
that separation
that goes
That's
between
what we're
the
all
two.
wondering.
That is something that was essentially
Inquiring minds
erased
would
in
like
this
to know.
administration. And the president had Pam Bondi at his side all of the time. And there was a message posted some months ago in which he seemed to and appeared to post what was meant to be a private message that started with the word Pam : and had a directive about actions that he wanted to see her take on when it came to potential indictments for people people that he wanted to see happen in a faster way with more of an urgency to it, directing her essentially to really treat that as a top priority. So we know that that frustration had been bubbling since then, and the White House hadn't confirmed that that was something that the president meant to make public, but he did, and we later were able
the other thing I was going to say about Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, how I thought that he would be gone first. I do think that the base is more angry with Pam Bondi than they are with Kash Patel. Because one, they're sexist. We know this. And also they are invested in the Epstein files. And they view her as having more responsibility for them than Kash Patel.
Confirm and report that that was exactly the case. And the president hasn't been shy about that. He has said publicly that he would like to see more cases go forward. And he has expressed that mounting frustration when he feels that that hasn't happened in certain particular cases. So this was a situation in which the president really has resisted a lot of high turnover in his cabinet. Of course, some weeks ago, we did see the DHS secretary, former Secretary Kristi Noem, fired from her position before former senator, now the new DHS Secretary Markwayne Mullin, was put into place. And that had been the first actual cabinet secretary that was ousted and then replaced. So Pam Bondi will be the second in a very, very critical role here, as she has been involved in many of the very urgent matters and situations that the president has been dealing with, from everything on national security to, again, some of these more local and domestic investigations that he wanted her to pursue.
And Monica, as you were delivering that report to us, one of our colleagues, Gabe Gutierrez, is reporting that according to a source familiar with the decision, it's Todd Blanche who will step into place as the acting attorney general for now. Again, not unexpected. We will see if that holds potentially for Blanche as a permanent position. Monica Alba, thank you. Kelly O'Donnell, our thanks to you as well. That does it for now for our NBC News special report. But we've got much more ahead on our streaming channel, NBC News Now, online at NBCnews.com, and then more, of course, later tonight on Nightly. I'm Hallie Jackson. Thanks for watching. Talk soon.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.
Okay. I think I'm going to go ahead and get into the reading. There was that video about Latter-day Saints are abandoning the Republican Party. I'll watch that on my own. I'm not going to put you all through that. I don't think it's just Latter-day Saints. More commonly known as Mormons. Okay, let's read. Shall we? We are still in the introduction for the Scarlet Pimpernel. And the introduction, I have to say, is very sympathetic towards the aristocracy and their oppression of the common people. So we have to call out that there are elements of class being that there is class loyalty happening as we are reading this, taking more of a Marxist lens, because I don't want to read a story about saving aristocrats from the masses when they were oppressing people. I don't remember where I was going with that. Anyway. Yeah, I don't want to hear more sympathy for them. It doesn't mean that, like, there should be all of this needless death, but the people were rising up for a reason. I'm going to go over that tomorrow. I was going to talk more about the French Revolution and how it led to Madame Guillotine, but I think I'll do that tomorrow. I may start a little bit earlier tomorrow as well, maybe like 1:30 to get to everything. We'll see. Okay, where did I leave off? Oh, excesses of the mob. That's what that was. At the end of the 19th century, fictional and dramatized representations of the French Revolution underscored how much mileage could be gotten out of this event. In the context of the 19th century French social politics, any reference to the French Revolution amounts to a recommendation of a different idea of community and indeed of history. In the 20th century, references to the Revolution confront the specter of modern collective violence. Together with the particular menace of the rise of communism in Europe, do you see the classism? The menace. In Europe, the French Revolution in this case becomes a way of talking about communism at a safe, that is, imaginary, distance. We might also instance specific treatments of the French Revolution in other countries beyond France, where it has been used likewise as an indirect way of addressing matters that cannot be referred to directly. Films also make ample use of the inherently theatricality. Wow, sorry, I'm going to try that over. Films also make ample use of the inherent theatricality of the French Revolution. Exemplary in this respect are Jean Renoir's famed movie, The Marseillaise. Jean Renoir. I didn't really pronounce that very well. Which shares its title with the French national anthem, and Abel Gance's Napoleon. On the other hand, the staging of public commemorations of the French Revolution as both rituals and projections seem to borrow freely from filmic theatricality. These fictions reflect the way in which the revolution staged both the obliteration of the old regime and the emergence of the new one. Critic Marie-Hélène Houet, in Performing Arts, Theatricality and the Terror, points out the hugely successful use of Paris as a stage for the revolutionary project. On the streets, with the new festivals and cults, such as the Festival of the Supreme Being, they're trying to be like, oh, it's anti-Christian to be against aristocracy. Parades and processions, and in the theater itself, with the reopening of public theaters. Yeah, these places where people can congregate and talk and organize. This is important. Each of these multifaceted representations includes intertwined images of the revolution as a political phenomenon and as a popular spectacle. As Paris becomes the very locus of that theatricality, the scaffold emerges almost as a protagonist in its own right. But theatricality is also a phenomenon exploited in real-life treatments of the revolution. Consider, for example, the fad of the victims' balls described by Patrick Waldlosowski in Les Échafauds du Romanesque. At these balls, which become popular after the fall of Robespierre in 1794, only progeny of the victims of the guillotine could attend, and young aristocratic girls would wear simple white dresses and tie a red ribbon around their necks to evoke their family's martyrdom. They would wrap their shoulders with a red shawl a la Charlotte Corday and would greet each other with parodies of the bowed neck of those condemned to die on the block. Yeah, there's a lot of sympathy for the aristocrats, the ruling class. Not as much for the masses, who were suffering greatly during this time. With these considerations in mind, we might return to the popular novel in general and to the Scarlet Pimpernel in particular. It is not surprising to find an ideal setting for an adventure novel in the French Revolution. For an event of such magnitude and built-in theatricality cannot avoid reinterpretation through political ideologies, popular fiction, or any other popular medium. Yet there is much more at stake when we read a work on the Revolution period than one about medieval England, say, or France's old regime. Our enthusiasm for Alexander Dumas' The Three Musketeers has little to do with our take on Louis the 13th. I struggle with Roman numerals. I disagree. The Three Musketeers, Alexander Dumas engaged in social commentary. He was a climber, a class climber, a social climber, whatever. But he also, like in Robin Hood, was talking about how there is too much accumulation of wealth in the upper classes. So I disagree. Or, if we are reading Dumas' La Reine Margot, our enjoyment of the novel does not influence our endorsement of Huguenot politics. Is that how you say that? Oh, God. Let's see. I don't know if I've ever tried to say this out loud. Huguenot. I wasn't that far off. Uh-oh. Okay, I thought I lost my spot. Huguenot politics. The revolution's legacy cuts deeper than that. In many ways, this event is too close for comfort. Too close for comfort? If you are an upper class, then you may be afraid to suffer the same fate. Unless you are advocating for distributing wealth. Baroness Orczy's choice of subject has been deemed iconoclastic by some. While most readers are only interested in galloping along with the Scarlet Pimpernel, some look for historical inaccuracies. And if the freedom to rewrite history, to combine fact and fiction, is characteristic of this type of novel, it is not surprising that there should be a strong resistance in the name of realism, historical accuracy, or even ideology. By taking an event marked with world historical dimensions and transposing it into the domain of adventure, comedy, and romance, Baroness Orczy's impertinent books desecrate mythical aspects of history. Whereas French critics have interpreted her vision as a fundamentally anti-revolutionary. Yes, exactly. It is. I don't use terminology like this. It's glazing. I'm never gonna use that again. I'm never gonna say that again. It is not understanding the gravity of the revolution. The originality of the novel does not reside in its indignation, even if it reminds some of Edmund Burke's Reflections on the Revolution in France, a work from 1790 that criticizes the excesses of the revolution. Rather, the novel's originality and appeal lies in the riveting mechanics of the narrative, the dosage of suspense, the torment and life and death predicaments, and characters distinctive enough to be memorable, but not developed enough to engage us in psychological analysis. Whereas, which that is interesting to me, but okay. Whereas history is essential to the creation and setting of the adventure novel, it is adventure that hooks us as readers. Next section is called Genesis of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Baroness Orczy's life certainly seems, if not novelistic, then at least eventful and cosmopolitan. I'm sure it was. Born in 1865 to an old and aristocratic Hungarian family, she lived briefly in Brussels and Paris before moving to London at the age of 15. She spent much of her later life in Monaco. Oh, interesting. Her autobiography, Links in a Chain of Life, published in 1947, is certainly not as riveting or as engaging. Okay, drag her. Is certainly not as riveting or as engaging as her novels, yet it provides an interesting perspective on her cultural and social background, as well as on the creation of the Scarlet Pimpernel. Amuska Orczy describes her childhood with the nostalgic colors of a brilliant, opulent, and medieval world now lost. Her parents owned a large agricultural property on the river Tarna, built by her grandfather. Obstinate, yet a dreamer, Orczy's father attempted to modernize the estate and mechanize its work. Fearing that they would be put out of work, the estate's peasants resisted, at first respectfully. See, so this is what inspired her to write The Scarlet Pimpernel, is that, like, the workers and the people who were living on this land were being mistreated. They tried to resist respectfully, and then it led to them damaging the property, and they fled because they were scared. They wouldn't have to do that if you listened to their demands. If you actually tried to treat them as human beings. But okay. On July 22nd, 1868, in the midst of the dances, masquerades, and G-word music celebrating Emma's sister's 5th birthday, Emma was 3, the peasants set fire to the Tiza Abad estate and destroyed everything. So they get to engage in all of this type of art, but not offer people humanity, like Romani people who probably were hired to be at this birthday party. Are you going to treat them like human beings? Let's see. The peasants set fire to the Tisa Abad estate and destroyed everything. Emma's remembrances are sketchy, but through her words, we imagine the 2 little girls watching the red glow through the shutters of their nursery, witnessing an incredible yet cinematic spectacle, a la Gone with the Wind, while their French governess piously laments, Mon Dieu, ayez pitié de nous. My God, have pity on us. In the wake of this traumatic event, the family eventually left Hungary. Orsi's recollection of the events leading up to the fire, even late in her life, is socially naive. According to her, the peasants were perfectly satisfied. Well, I'm glad they're at least acknowledging that it's naive. The peasants were perfectly satisfied under the benevolent rule of her father. It was her father's overly progressive ideals that caused the destruction of the estate. I don't think so. Critics of Orsi's works find in this episode the absolute inspiration for the anti-revolutionary views expressed in the Scarlet Pimpernel, exactly. And other events and comments in Links in a Chain of Life further attest to her political conservatism. In June 1918, Hungarian Bolsheviks occupied Orsi's cousin's estate and her family's ancestral home. Tapio Sag is the name of the home, and detained her aged mother there for 10 weeks. In Orsi's narration of the ransacking of the ancestral castle by an ugly and depraved mob, these are quoted, ugly, depraved, and of her mother's fear and humiliation at the hand of the Bolsheviks. She insists that her mother never lost her dignity and that she felt like Marie Antoinette going to the guillotine. To draw a parallel between the French Revolution and political events in Orsi's day is certainly easy and not novel. Wow. Before even reading this introduction, me taking a Marxist Du Boisian lens to this really was accurate. And I was not expecting to read about Bolsheviks and them having a direct connection to the inspiration of this book, but that's why I call this aristocratic propaganda. Okay. To draw a parallel between the French Revolution and political events in Orsi's day is certainly easy and not novel. Orsi also wrote that Mussolini and fascism were, in the early years, of course, quote, the salvation of Italy. Gross. Here again, the theme of violent mobs maliciously destroying private property. Oh, because that's so harmful to people who have so much money and multiple properties. And striking for no reason. Striking for no reason. They were just saying that their dad was trying to replace them with machines, the workers. And striking for no reason recurs. But this analogy has its limits. For later in the book, Orsi equates Italian fascism to, quote, a reign of terror comparable only to the days of terror of Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety during the French Revolution. Okay, so you can see when these things are harmful, once they've escalated to a certain point, not the origin of these things. and the circumstances that lead to this kind of fascist violence. If she praises the early days of Italian fascism, does this make her a supporter of the first days of the French Revolution? Finally, Orsi's ambivalent statement on Jews and their responsibility for Hungarian anti-Semitism is their responsibility. That Jews are responsibility for anti-Semitism in Hungary is another target for criticism by commenters of her work. Yeah, certainly. While she laments Nazi cruelty toward Jewish populations during World War II, she also depicts Jews as a, quote, as a race who had their faults, and they were grievous faults, end quote. Okay. According to Orsi, they expressed the Hungarian peasantry for centuries. They oppressed. For centuries, through their exactions and their rapacity, meaning that Jewish people had been oppressing the Hungarian peasants, not her and her family. We see the misdirection and blatant anti-Semitism. Jesus Christ. In this regard, her depiction of the Jew in the Scarlet Pimpernel has not gone unnoticed. Does he not have a name? This is what anti-Semitism looks like, especially in these kinds of novels, is that they just will say, like, a Jew, instead of saying, like, oh, this is a person with a name and hopes and dreams. This is an excerpt from the book. Degas returned, followed by an elderly Jew in a dirty, threadbare gabardine, worn greasy across the shoulders. That is also a common anti-Semitic trope in these older books, is calling people greasy. His red hair, which he wore after the fashion of the Polish Jews, with the corkscrew curls each side of his face, was plentifully sprinkled with gray. A general coating of grime about his cheeks and his chin gave him a peculiarly dirty and loathsome appearance. This is gross. He had the habitual stoop, those of his race affected in mock humility in past centuries, before the dawn of equality and freedom in matters of faith, and he walked with the peculiar shuffling gait which has remained the characteristic of the Jew trader in continental Europe to this day. Okay, just all of these deeply discriminatory perceptions. Orsi's portrayal of the Jew is reminiscent of 19th century caricatures and scarcely original. Hello. One can find dozens of similar passages in European literature of the period. However, to interpret her prejudiced views through our modern lens does not suffice to explain the historical context in which Orsi was raised, nor her fictional inspirations. Just like justifying her anti-Semitism. The peasant revolt of Orsi's childhood doubtlessly constitutes an inspiration to her fiction. The fact that she expresses racial prejudices and describes the Jew as a caricature certainly makes modern readers uneasy. Also, whoever is writing this introduction loves referring to that character in that way. But these elements do not explain the Scarlet Pimpernel series, nor do they explain Orsi's positions on the French Revolution. Linking her saga to the frightful events of her childhood in order to come to analytical conclusions about the text amounts to studying the work through the life of the author, a common critical practice a century ago, but one that we have since learned to mistrust. The reality is, of course, more complex. Links in a chain of life helps us understand Orsi's position, a position at the convergence of two worlds during the transition from an old and archaic economic system to a new one. Yeah, like feudal in nature. Hi, Teeny. Hi. What's up? Come here. She usually comes near the end lately. the end of the stream, that is. Come here. There you go. Where was I? Hi. Oh, okay. Just as it helps us see how she negotiated, and in her own way embraced modernity. We read The Scarlet Pimpernel today because the work gives us pleasure, and unlike many popular novels that were highly fashionable in their time but don't speak to us today, it is a rich, diverse... In what way? Because the previous example does not seem to be that. An eventful narrative whose drama succeeds in sustaining our interest and delight. The ideological background of popular novels is unquestionably fascinating to the historian of ideas as a reliable reflection of the time. The genre's simplistic and unmediated style gives us direct access to what we fancy to believe is historical reality. Hi, Bug. I call her Inspector Tiny because she's always on quality control. Humbug. Do you want me to hold you? Here. Come here. Oh, no? Okay. Anyway. Classical literature, by dint of being self-consciously complex, renders that access much more difficult. However, we don't read The Scarlet Pimpernel because we need yet another representation of the French Revolution. We read the novel because it provides us with narrative suspense, excitement, reversals. Reversals and surprises. It could be said that The Scarlet Pimpernel is formulaic. This formula might not be very new, but the enduring popularity of the work mitigates any accusation that The Scarlet Pimpernel is hackneyed or a mere potboiler. Oh, good jump. Good jump. In her autobiography, Orsi describes how she emerged from being an amateur writer of suspense stories for magazines into an author of both drama and fiction. One common thread in this progression is the importance of visual metaphors. This is an excerpt from Links in a Chain of Life, her autobiography. I obtained through my training in pictorial art the faculty of seeing the scenes, the characters, the movement of what my imagination was invoking for me. In the same way as I originally saw the Scarlet Pimpernel on the platform of a railroad station, so did I see the seething mobs in the Paris of the Revolution, the tumbrils, the guillotine, the prisoners, in the conciergerie, the Scarlet Pimpernel plotting and planning for their release. I saw him in his various disguises. Pictures, yes, they were all pictures before me. Real, vivid pictures. I saw them as pictures before I put pen to paper. Orsi was not a lonesome writer living in a romantic past, but a regular theater-goer in London. She enjoyed the thrill of watching unsophisticated productions, particularly those where the public delights in intervening, applauding the chivalrous hero, or booing the villain, and she would return home and analyze their effects. She was a writer in the making. She tells us how she never watched a new play in its entirety, but left before the end in order to write her own personal ending. Okay. I mean, that's like an interesting creative outlet, but you aren't ever going to finish a play. We took ourselves and our impressions home, and there in our inexperienced way, attempted to unravel the tangled skein of the drama as we in our ignorance thought it should be unraveled. or else we would deliberately miss the first act of a new play, watch the building up of the story, of which we did not know the beginning, and at home reconstruct the plot, introducing the characters whose acquaintance we had made in the subsequent act. And finally, on another occasion, we would sit through the whole play and see how far we had been wrong or right in our ideas of dramatic construction. Okay, people with just like a lot of wealth being able to attend a lot of plays. She started writing short stories and devoured popular magazines to learn the tricks of the trade, study the style, and immerse herself in the world of pulp fiction. For her novel, The Old Man in the Corner, she created a London-based proto-detective, a female journalist who shares the work of detection with an old man. London always played a prominent part in her literary imagination. In her autobiography, she reports that she was once in close proximity to a slaying by the infamous Jack the Ripper. Later, she diversified her production by creating intrigues that took place outside of London, but she did not check her sources. And once, 3 days after publishing a detective story set in Glasgow in which she brilliantly displayed her ignorance of Scottish law, the magazine was deluged with hundreds of letters from angry readers. Orsi, though, was learning how to become a writer. Okay. But she also was able to, like, get into that position, even had the opportunity because she was an aristocrat. Orsi sojourned in Paris during the 1900 to 1901 World's Fair. Later, she recalled being confronted there with the French hatred of Great Britain, and she's probably offended by that. The Boer War, which saw the British fight the Afrikaners for possession of South Africa, was in full swing. She encountered negative popular cliches, this time from the other side of the channel, and discovered that in French literature of the day, all the British male caricatures really, have, quote, red hair, side whiskers, huge mouths, and large yellow teeth, end quote, while the women have, quote, yellow straw boaters, long moth-eaten fur boas, huge feet and hands, and huge teeth, end quote. These months, Orsi tells us, proved seminal, for it was here that she came up with the outline of the Scarlet Pimpernel. She was discouraged from choosing the French Revolution as her topic by editors who deemed it obsolete. She was told that, quote, old Dumas and the Three Musketeers are as extinct as the dodo, end quote. But she persisted, and having completed her novel, adapted it with her husband for the theater. After rocky beginnings, the play was a popular success, albeit one that appalled the press. But the novel, published in 1905, was unanimously appreciated. Next section, the Scarlet Pimpernel as modern hero. Who is the Scarlet Pimpernel? Since we learn his identity only in the second half of the novel, the reader should in no way expect to find out who he is in this introduction. Oh, like no spoilers. Which normally introductions do spoil the novel, so this is kind of a rarity. Yet we can still sketch some of his traits. The Scarlet Pimpernel is a hero in the classic sense of the term. He has taken upon himself a titanic and desperate task to rescue aristocrats from the hands of the guillotine and take them safely to England. Titanic because thousands of people are in danger, and because the rhythm of the violence increases as we progress in the series. Desperate because, in a way, the Scarlet Pimpernel cannot rescue a principal, only individuals, but he chooses nonetheless to go ahead and make whatever small difference he can by saving a few. This defines his heroic traits. Aware that his enterprise is somewhat hopeless, for the revolution will not disappear, and if he doesn't know it, his readers know it, he still believes that risking his and his young followers' lives has value. In other words, he is heroic because he is not a pragmatist. However, the Scarlet Pimpernel painstakingly prepares for rescues, and he will even renounce a mission if he deems it unworkable on practical grounds. Of course, the recipe has fed many a Hollywood movie. A dangerous and nearly impossible mission must be accomplished. Most will give up, but a handful of fearless men will attempt and succeed. The League of the Pimpernel, composed of 19 young English aristocrats, is secret. A secret society with its rules of absolute loyalty among the members. Oh, were they also, engaging in, Epstein-like activities? Because that's what these exclusive secret societies and circles tend to be doing. Just saying. Its rules of absolute loyalty among members and, at times, contempt for the law, recall Honoré Balzac's The 13, is a surefire ingredient for narrative excitement. So it's okay for the noble people to be breaking the law. It's not okay for the working class, the common people, the peasants that they would say, to be breaking the law. This existence of a secret society suggests that there is another order, another type of justice, one that will affect the most vulnerable characters. Vulnerable according to whom? Vulnerable how? Because these aristocrats are not who I would call vulnerable. I mean, the ones who are in the French Revolution, I guess they are more at risk of being killed, but it is not without certain reasoning of the masses, especially when there is a so-called system of justice that unfairly favors the upper class. If there is a secret underground order, one looks at reality differently. However, in this case, secrecy is perhaps paradoxically coupled with fame. At the beginning of the novel, the Pimpernel is already a legend. Known by all, he has inspired fads and fashions, and he fuels them by leaving a calling card, the Pimpernel flower. He mocks his enemies, which only brings more notice to his exploits. The net tightens with each mission, making the next attempt more perilous. Guards are doubled, security measures multiplied. Yet the Pimpernel continues to snatch his imperiled aristocrats. This combination of impertinence and courage makes him extremely powerful. He also has, a lot of resources at his disposal, so. For the renown of the Scarlet Pimpernel feeds on the small details that distinguish him from ordinary people. Leaving crafted little flowers is a luxury and a danger, and a powerful thrill. In the 1934 movie version, the Pimpernel's nemesis, Chauvelin, lies in wait for the Pimpernel at a London ball and falls asleep in an armchair. Upon waking, he finds delicately pinned to his chest an ironic note signed by the Scarlet Pimpernel. It is an exemplary scene. The Scarlet Pimpernel is impertinent, insouciant, and unbeatable. Chauvelin will grow obsessed with the idea of capturing the Pimpernel. Novel after novel, he will design careful traps and manipulate people and things, but when his own daughter becomes a victim of the dreaded Revolutionary Council, of course, he too will need the help of the Scarlet Pimpernel, who will agree, of course, noblesse oblige. Marguerite St. Just, aka Lady Blakeney, is a more complex character. French and a distant cousin of the revolutionary Saint-Just himself, she is several times referred to as the cleverest woman in Europe. A former actress at the Théâtre Français in Paris. I don't know why I switched from a French accent to do an American accent saying Paris. In Paris. And a former hostess of a salon whose principle was to unite superiorly gifted people in an aristocracy of the mind. She embodies Republican ideals. Like Figaro, the famous servant in the play by Pierre-Augustin Caron de Beaumarchais, oh boy, that Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart adapted for the opera, she views inequality in birth to be a mere accident. While she deems disparities in talents and intelligence as inevitable, that is not the point. Quote, money and titles may be hereditary, but brains are not, end quote. She views inequality in birth to be a mere accident. Well, like accident of birth? Or that the system that they are born into is an accident. Marguerite constitutes a strange hybrid between the femme fatale and the loyal companion. Throughout the novel, her social status remains ambiguous. While she believes in the Republican ideals of the revolution, she condemns its excesses. She is described as, quote, somewhat bohemian, end quote, which probably means she is bi. If someone is saying they're bohemian, it's like, okay, you're queer in some way or you're progressive in some way. Yet she is married into English money and nobility, and if the company of some aristocrats pleases her, she socializes with no less a personage than the Prince of Wales. Okay. French aristocrats, in any case, with their hidebound prejudices, still annoy her. In the novel, she transforms herself from a young Parisian intellectual beauty into a lady, a metamorphosis that only the adventure novel allows, for in reality, the borders between social classes were not very permeable. Exactly. It's fantasy. Yet her past seems dubious, perhaps even tainted. She is held responsible for the death of innocent aristocrats, an error of youth for some, but in the opinion of her husband, Sir Percy, an unredeemable mistake. Okay. As Trollope would say, can you forgive her? In the typology of the heroes of the adventure novel, the Scarlet Pimpernel is an avenger. He acts secretly, displays incredible bravery, has mysterious powers, and seems supernatural to the flabbergasted revolutionaries. Despite their efforts, he always gets away. There is, as critics have pointed out, some Robin Hood in him. It's a reverse Robin Hood. He is not taking from the rich and distributing it to the poor. He is helping out the rich and saving them from the lower class. In that he mocks the authorities and does not recognize their legitimacy. His incredible agility and the tremendous risks he takes, plus the ultimate coup de théâtre that enables him to escape when we think that all is lost, recalls our contemporary ideas of a superhero. Superheroes had not been invented when the Baroness wrote her novel, but the Scarlet Pimpernel's chivalry, courage, and impressive powers make him in certain respects their ancestor. Okay, we still have a lot of this introduction. Actually, maybe not a lot, but we still have a few pages. Let's see. Okay. Since this is going on longer than I expected, I'm going to stop there. And then tomorrow we'll be able to get into chapter 1. Okay. Tomorrow is Culture Corner. Yay. We're going to go over some artistic pieces that I have been excited about lately. Some of these are current, some of them are not, so we'll get a mix there. I want to finish going over these other videos that I had planned for today, especially the left tube op tier list that FD Signifier did. I really want to watch that, and then also watch this background of the French Revolution to prep for the reading. Okay, that's going to be it for me today. But thank you for being here. It was good chatting with you. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are, and I will see you soon. Okay, bye.